Well, good afternoon, good morning, everyone, wherever you are. Thank you for joining. If you're tuning in on X, feel free to go over to YouTube if you like, and you can join the conversation there with the YouTube chat. Hi, everyone. Welcome or thanks for joining. And let me just get this started here. So I had a few things that I was going to speak about today that I was planning. And then two major things happened. The first one is, of course, President Trump came out with his statement, and we're going to get to that in a moment. And the second thing was just literally moments ago, King Reza Pahlavi, who is the leader of the Iranian official opposition, he put out a statement. And in exactly 1 hour, he is going to be speaking about the revolution and essentially the day after the overthrow of the Islamic Republic at the Council of Foreign Relations. That is pretty big. Yes, he does go live in 53 minutes, and I will be um, broadcasting him live on this stream as well. So I think it's a little bit too late for me to change the title. I don't know how to do that. I'm still new to StreamYard, but definitely stick around because I will be live streaming his speech right here. So that's going to be very important. So having said that, let's begin with the first piece of news here. So as you may have seen, President Trump came out with a statement about an hour and a half ago. And I'm just going to read this for um, for everyone's benefit. Let me just see. I'm still kind of figuring out my screen and how it all works. But all right, here we go. So, President Trump writes, Hamas has been a ruthless and violent threat for many years in the Middle East. They have killed and made lives unbearably miserable, culminating with the October 7th massacre in Israel. Babies, women, children, old people, and many young men and women, boys and girls getting ready to celebrate their future lives together. As retribution for the October 7th attack on civilization, more than 25,000 Hamas soldiers have already been killed. I'm glad that he put soldiers in quotation marks because, of course, they're not soldiers, they're terrorists. Most of the rest are surrounded and militarily trapped, just waiting for me to give the word go for their lives to be quickly extinguished. As for the rest, we know where and who you are, and you will be hunted down and killed. I'm asking that all innocent Palestinians immediately leave this area of potentially great future death for safer parts of Gaza. Everyone will be well cared for by those who are waiting to help. Fortunately for Hamas, however, they will be given one last chance. Great, powerful, and very rich nations of the Middle East and the surrounding areas beyond, together with the United States of America, have agreed, with Israel signing on, to peace after 3,000 years in the Middle East. This deal also spares the lives of all remaining Hamas fighters. The details of the document are known to the world, and it is a great one for all. We will have peace in the Middle East one way or the other. The violence and bloodshed will stop. Release the hostages, all of them, including the bodies of those that are dead now. An agreement must be reached with Hamas by Sunday evening at 6 p.m. Washington, D.C. time. Every country has signed on. If this last chance agreement is not reached, all hell, like no one has ever seen before, will break out against Hamas. There will be peace in the Middle East one way or the other. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald J. Trump. So it's very interesting here. There's a few things that President Trump writes in his statement that caught my eye. The first one is that he says all countries have signed on. Well, we know for a fact that the Islamic Republic occupying Iran certainly has not signed on. However, we do know that the Iranian opposition, under the leadership of King Reza Pahlavi, have made it very clear that that they will normalize relations with Israel. So it is very, um, what's the word I'm looking for? It's justifiable, I guess, to assume that the opposition, the transitional government and the official opposition to the Islamic Republic would sign on to something like this. 100% they would, because everyone wants peace, and Hamas does need to be eradicated. So that's very interesting. He talks about all countries having signed on, but he excludes the Islamic Republic. Does that mean that the Islamic Republic is irrelevant? Does that mean that there's something bigger going on? Does that mean that he knows that the end of the Islamic Republic is near and therefore what they think is irrelevant? These are some of the questions that are going through my head right now because, as I've explained before, there is no way in heck, I'll say heck because I want to keep it PG-13, but there is no way in heck that Khamenei, who is the supreme dictator of the Islamic Republic, would ever sign on to a peace agreement with Israel. And that is because the one of the foundational pillars of the Islamic Republic under Khamenei is this jihad with Israel. So this is very interesting. But the concern that I have with this, and I'll explain my concern with this statement, is that, I've said this before. When you're dealing with terrorists, you cannot negotiate with them because they're not rational actors. So, and Prime Minister Netanyahu, he knows this because, he's from the Middle East. He's been dealing with terrorists. So, all of us from the Middle East, we understand what their Islamic jihadi ideology is like. So when President Trump first made the Gaza peace announcement, and I do have that queued up, and I do want to play that as well because I think what President Trump said is very important, and I kind of want to break it down as we go through it because that ties into what he's saying here. But when they first made the announcement, they basically gave Hamas 72 hours. Not just Hamas, they also gave Iran, and I hate to say Iran, it's the Islamic Republic in Iran. So they gave the Islamic Republic in Iran that same amount of time to agree and sign on to this peace treaty. But of course, we know that the Islamic Republic isn't going to do that. So that was, that first came out. They gave 72 hours notice. And of course, Hamas stalled and pushed back and everything. And so this delay tactic that Hamas is doing may or may not be working. And the reason that I'm saying this may or may not be working is because what I've noticed between um, President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu is that President Trump is really playing the good cop here. So there's a good cop, bad cop situation going between Israel and the United States when it comes to dealing with Islamic terrorists, whether it's Hamas or Hezbollah or the Houthis or even the Islamic Republic. And it's a strategy that has been working. It really is a strategy that has been working. And I want to just remind everyone of sorry, my allergies here. I just want to remind everyone during the 12-day conflict, when reporters were asking if President Trump was going to get the United States involved, he said, I'll make a decision within 2 weeks. And then literally within 48 hours, you have these B-2 bombers that destroyed the Islamic Republic's nuclear facilities, Fordo and elsewhere. So this deadline, take it with a grain of salt. I don't know. I mean, this could be the final chance. This could be the last chance. I mean, I do believe this is the last chance. I just don't know if this deadline is firm. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like if Hamas does something, or if the Islamic Republic does something, um, that might trigger that might trigger this deadline sooner, right? I mean, I don't know. I don't know. But I think there's more to the statement than meets the eye, because this will have now, the deadline here will have essentially been 1 week, right? 7 days since the proposed peace agreement. So I just want to go back now, and I want to, um, let's see, how do I do this? I think there's a way for me to, okay, here we go. So this is how I can share screens. Perfect. Do we see that? Oh, amazing. All right. So I want to play this now. I just want to play the announcement, the peace announcement that President Trump made um, last week. And let's go back and listen to that, because there's a lot of nuances in his messaging. And we're kind of picking up on that now. But let's just go back, and I'll kind of pause and I'll give my thoughts as okay, I learned something new. I accidentally tried to swipe left, and I exited my studio. There we go. Let's not make that mistake again. All right, this is why I need to set up two monitors here, so I don't make this mistake. But all right, lesson learned here. All right, so I'm gonna play this video, and let's just listen to this, and then I want to pick out a few pieces here, especially the parts where Trump is referring to. He says Iran, but I like to say the Islamic Republic, because the Islamic Republic is occupying my country of Iran. Of course, as you all may or may not know, I am Iranian, so I like to make that distinction, as do the vast majority of Iranians. So let's go back and play this now.
Thank you very much, everybody. So this is a big, big day, a beautiful day, potentially one of the great days ever in civilization. Things that have been going on for hundreds of years and thousands of years. At least we're at a minimum very, very close, and I think we're beyond very close. And I want to thank Bibi for really getting in there and doing a job. We've worked well together, as we have with many other countries, both of us, with many other countries, which is the only way this whole situation gets solved. And I'm not just talking about Gaza. Gaza is one thing, but we're talking about much beyond Gaza. The whole deal, everything getting solved. It's called peace in the Middle East. So today is a historic day for peace, and Prime Minister Netanyahu and I have just concluded an important meeting on many vital issues, including Iran, trade, the expansion of the Abraham Accords, and most importantly, we discussed how to end the war in Gaza, but it's just a part of the bigger picture, which is peace in the Middle East. And let's call it eternal peace in the Middle East. So this is far more than anybody expected, but the level of support that I've had from the nations in the Middle East and surrounding Israel and neighbors of Israel has been incredible, incredible. Every single one of them. This afternoon, after extensive consultation with our friends and partners throughout the region, I'm formally releasing our principles for peace, which people have really liked, I must say. And these are done, not just routinely done, these are done with total consideration and working with the nations that we're talking about. All of these nations have made contributions to those suggestions. I want to thank the leaders of many Arab and Muslim nations for their tremendous support in developing the proposal, along with many of our allies in Europe. Europe has been very much involved, and as I was called by many of the European leaders, most of them saying, is this true? Are you really doing peace in the Middle East? This is the most incredible thing we've heard. Some think it's the biggest thing they've ever heard. They called just to find out, was it just a rumor or is it actually done? And then they said, have you spoken to the Arab leaders? Have you spoken to all of the other leaders that we have to get? A lot of people involved in this one. I also want to thank Prime Minister Netanyahu for agreeing to the plan and for trusting that if we work together, we can bring an end to the death and destruction that we've seen for so many years, decades, even centuries, and begin a new chapter of security, peace, and prosperity for the entire region. And I want to just say that my meetings and dialogue that we had with so many countries, Saudi Arabia as an example, the king is a phenomenal person. The Emir of Qatar, he's an incredible people. UAE, and that's MBZ and ABZ. We're totally involved. These are the people that we've been dealing with and who've been actually very much involved in this negotiation, giving us ideas, things they can live with, things they can't live with. Pretty complex. I mean, after 2,000, 3,000 years, whatever it is, I guess it's got to be a little complex, or it would have been done a long time ago. The King of Jordan was with us, as you know, in the United Nations. The President of Turkey, President Erdogan, is a friend of mine, a strong man, but a good man. President of Indonesia, somebody who's an amazing leader, Prabowo. He is an amazing leader and respected by everybody. He was in the room with us. We were together with most of these people that I'm mentioning. Others were by phone or the next day. The Prime Minister and the Field Marshal of Pakistan, they were with us right from the beginning. Incredible. In fact, they just put out a statement that they fully believe in this pact. It just came out just as I was walking around. They said, sir, you have a big notice from the Prime Minister of Pakistan and from the Field Marshal that they back this 100%. President El-Sisi of Egypt, who's terrific. And these are people I've gotten to know over the years. I mean, I would say it started around 2015 and then went into 2016 when the presidency officially began. But I've known them actually for a long time, and they're in many cases really great men. I can't say in all cases, but I will tell you in many cases they're great men and some great women too. They tend to be mostly men, however, I will say that. But if accepted by Hamas, this proposal calls for the release of all remaining hostages immediately, but in no case more than 72 hours. So the hostages are coming back, and I hate even saying that.
So that's one of the first mistakes that I want to point out that one of the biggest mistakes that a lot of Western politicians make is, so here he gave a deadline of 72 hours. So this was done on Monday, so 72 hours, presumably um, like Thursday. Okay, so presumably the hostages should have all been released by Thursday. It's Friday right now. That hasn't happened. Now, of course, Hamas is using stalling tactics, as we know full well. So President Trump already gave a deadline here, and for him to now give another deadline until Sunday, um, I understand what he's doing because those of us who are, civilized, rational actors, we understand the art of the deal, we understand negotiations, but I mean, I don't know if he knows this or understands this yet or not. I mean, maybe he does and he's just toying with them. But those of us from the Middle East, we understand that you can't negotiate. So the fact that he gave a deadline and now he has extended that deadline. So initially he said, 72 hours, so that would have been Thursday. But the fact that he now extended that deadline and he's extended it to Sunday. Um, Hamas and their supporters, and all the Islamists in the West, they're not going to see this as negotiation, or grace or anything like that. They are going to see this as a sign of weakness. They are going to see this as a concession by President Trump. And this is only going to embolden them even further to continue on the path that they are going down. And, Igor, you're absolutely right. The Mujahideen, they don't value life, not even their own. For those who might not be aware, Mujahideen, it literally translates to fighters of jihad or warriors of jihad, or I don't know, whatever garbage nonsense they want, it is. And these people are basically like they're radicalized, they're indoctrinated, right? So for them, they are fighting this holy war, and the end result of this holy war is dying this glorious death where they basically become martyrs, and then they go to their weird paradise with their 72 virgins, and it's like very, very bizarre version of heaven. I mean, if anyone actually looks at their version of heaven, it's very weird. It's basically like it's like a mass orgy and everyone gets drunk. It's very bizarre. But this is what they're fighting for. They're fighting for this, and so these are not rational actors, because their entire goal is to die for Allah and become a martyr and then be glorified in the afterlife with their 72 virgins. So, of course, I mean, when you're trying to negotiate with these people, they're not going to be rational. You cannot have a normal conversation with them. So, yeah, and uh, yeah, the MEK, of course, absolutely very good at disguising. The MEK, I'm not going to get into them too much here, but the MEK is like this Islamist communist Iranian terrorist group. So, I mean, they're worse than, like, they're basically worse than the Islamic Republic, if that's even possible. They're even more hated by Iranians than the Islamic Republic themselves. And, again, there are these fighters of jihad, and it's like how low IQ do you have to be to not only be like a communist, but like you're an Islamist at the same time? So it's like double low IQ to even be that idiotic to join this sort of cult. But that's the first mistake I just wanted to point out President Trump made. Unless now the only thing I can think of is that he provided the timeline. So he provided the deadline the first time, and today he provided another deadline. And we'll go back and, actually, maybe I'll just pull up that message again. So, where is it? On this one, so here he says, every country has signed on. So he's like, if this last chance agreement is not reached, all hell, like no one has ever seen before, will break out against Hamas. There will be peace in the Middle East one way or the other. So, I mean, it does seem like he's definitely more serious right now. The other thing that he said in his warning today, to Hamas, is he also said to all the civilians in Gaza to leave the area. So he said, I'm asking that all innocent Palestinians immediately leave this area of potentially great future death for safer parts of Gaza. Everyone will be well cared for by those that are waiting to help. So the President of the United States is giving an evacuation order to the people in Gaza. I can't recall the last time that I've seen something like that, if ever, from the President of the United States. But that is very significant. So the fact that President Trump is giving this evacuation order himself lets me know that there is definitely something brewing behind the scenes. It also sends a signal to everyone that Israel and the United States are definitely working together and are coordinating. And just like President Trump said in his speech, in his announcement, and we're going to go back and finish watching that, but just like he said in his announcement, um, if Hamas does not comply with this proposed peace agreement, then Israel has the green light to go ahead and do whatever it is that they need to do. So let's go back and finish watching President Trump's statement.
This from the standpoint doesn't sound right, but
Well,
it
I'll
is
go back just
so
a little
important to
bit.
the
I'll go back just a little bit so that we can hear his deadline.
paper. I will say that. But if accepted by Hamas, this proposal calls for the release of all remaining hostages immediately, but in no case more than 72 hours. So the hostages are coming back, and I hate even saying this from the standpoint, doesn't sound right, but it is so important to the parents. The bodies of the young men, I believe in almost all cases, the young men are coming back immediately. I met with parents. The parents felt as strongly about getting the body of their dead boy back as they did as though the boy were alive and well. It's so important to them. And it means the immediate end to the war itself, not just Gaza. It's the war itself. Under the plan, Arab and Muslim countries have committed, and in writing in many cases, but I actually would take their word for it. The people I mentioned, I'd take their word for it, to demilitarize Gaza, and that's quickly. Decommission the military capabilities of Hamas and all other terror organizations. Do that immediately. And we're relying on the countries that I named and others to deal with Hamas. And I'm hearing that Hamas wants to get this done too, and that's a good thing. And destroy all terror infrastructure, including the tunnels, weapons, production facilities. They have a lot of production facilities that we're destroying. They'll also help train local police forces in the areas that we're discussing right now, in particular in and around Gaza, working with the new transitional authority in Gaza. All parties will agree on a timeline for Israeli forces to withdraw in phases. They'll be withdrawing in phases. No more shooting, hopefully, as progress is made toward achieving these goals. Arab and Muslim nations need to be allowed the chance to fulfill these commitments of dealing with Hamas. They have to deal with them because they were the one group that we have not dealt with. I haven't dealt with them. But the Arab countries are going to, and Muslim countries are going to be dealing with Hamas, and I believe they've already.
So just a quick note here, he refers to the Arab and Muslim countries. So that doesn't include Iran, right? Even though Iran is it's occupied by the Islamic Republic, it's not a Muslim country. The vast majority of Iranians are not Muslim, and of course we're not Arab either. So it's very interesting that he's referring to that and making that distinction here. So he doesn't mention so the way he's referencing it, Iran is not included in this. So that's very an interesting point that I want everyone to kind of like focus on.
Been there. I think they probably have an understanding, and they haven't maybe mentioned that, but I would imagine they do. Otherwise, they wouldn't have gone as far as they've gone. If they're unable to do so, then Israel would have the absolute right and actually our full backing, U.S. full backing. Marco's here. A lot of our leaders are here. Our great vice president, Susan.
So he's not mincing words. President Trump is not mincing words. He's essentially saying that if the various countries do not sign on, if Hamas does not accept this peace agreement, then Israel has our full support to do whatever it is they need to do. And based on his message today, let me just go back and bring that up again so that we can look at this together. So based on his message today, the fact that he is now telling people in certain parts of Gaza to evacuate and go to safer places. And then he also says, all hell like no one has seen before will break out against Hamas. Um, that's, I mean, I would not ignore that. I would not consider that bluffing. So it's very, very clear that Israel and the United States are getting ready to go in and eradicate Hamas once and for all. Um, I cannot see a scenario where Hamas will agree to any sort of peace agreement with Israel, because the whole purpose of Hamas is like it's this genocidal, jihadi um, death cult that's essentially was created for the purpose of waging jihad against Israel. So if Hamas signs this peace agreement with Israel, literally its reason for existing goes away, right? It's the same logic for the Islamic Republic. The Islamic Republic, Khamenei and all those like ayatollahs and terrorists, they are never going to agree to a peace treaty with Israel because that is antithetical to their very purpose. One of the foundational pillars of the Islamic Republic occupying Iran is this fake Palestinian cause, is their fake, weird jihad or whatever against Israel. Without their jihad, they have no purpose. And if you look at the history of the 1979 Islamic coup d'etat, I like to call it a coup d'etat and not a revolution, because it really is an occupation. If you look at the history of the 1979 Islamic coup d'etat, they came to power on the sort of on this fake Palestinian cause, right? Like they used the allyship and relationship between the imperial state of Iran at the time and Israel to promote their Islamofascist jihadi agenda. And even to this day, the Islamic Republic will continually push and promote all of the jihadi lies and propaganda about, um, Palestine. The same narratives that you're seeing in the West, the things that people talk about right now, like the ignorant Western leftists when it comes to, oh, the genocide and the starvation and, all that nonsense. That's not new. That narrative has been promoted and pushed in radicalized Middle Eastern societies for a very long time. The Islamic Republic has constantly pushed that narrative, especially inside of Iran. And it's one of the reasons that, like, we Iranians, we just don't buy it because we're used to this propaganda. We can smell it like a mile away, and we've pretty much become desensitized to all of this propaganda because they've been trying to force it down our throats for 47 years. We're not buying it. We know exactly what's going on. And, there's the reason that after the October 7 genocidal massacre by Hamas of, over 1,200 innocent Jews, one of the first hashtags to come out on social media was Iranians stand with Israel because we saw exactly what happened. We knew exactly where that ideology was coming from, and we knew exactly who was to blame, which was Hamas, and of course, funded by the Islamic Republic. So, one of the reasons that the people who are, claim they're, pro-Palestine, even though they're actually pro-Hamas, one of the reasons that, many of these pro-Hamas organizations don't like us Iranians is because we call out their BS. And, we're not part of their like Islamic Ummah, right? Like this Ummah, whatever it is, that they call it. We're not a part of it. We've never been a part of it. We reject it, and we don't even have that Arab mindset mentality because we're not Arab. We're Iranian, right? We are indigenous to Iran, the same way that Jewish people are indigenous to the land of Israel. And our collective societies and civilizations goes back thousands of years. It's literally in our history, that collective shared history. Um, and we've had that for like thousands of years before Islam was even invented, right? So it's really irrelevant what they say, but that's one of the reasons that the Islamic Republic hasn't been able to indoctrinate us, because we have that shared history. We have that Iranian identity, that is independent and separate from Islam. And many Iranians, again, we're not Muslim. We don't identify as Muslim. And there's currently a renaissance and an awakening happening within Iranian society, because the more that we're learning about our history, the history that the Islamic Republic has tried to hide from us for 47 years. But when you hide something from someone, they become more interested in it. So there's this national renaissance that's happening side by side with the Iranian Revolution. And when you look at the history of Iran and Iranians, you will find that, I mean, the Iranian identity in and of itself is antithetical to Islam. And I will get into that more, but Iranians have been fighting this for 1400 years. So this fight that we have had is not new. This is actually a fight against colonization. So what is currently happening within Iranian society is we are decolonizing from the religion and identity and mindset of our Islamic colonizers, and they don't like that. So that's why they accuse us of Islamophobia, right? Islamophobia is actually a word that was coined by the Islamic Republic, decades ago, in order to silence Iranians who spoke out against the Islamic Republic and against their, jihad and their practices. And I will definitely speak about that because there are certain Iranian figures within like Iranian history that goes back thousands of years, that if I was even going to speak about what they did, if I was going to speak about their fight against their, Muslim occupiers and Muslim oppressors, um, it would be considered very Islamophobic by today's standards. And that's one of the dangers of allowing this colonization mindset, because you all of a sudden have these people who have oppressed many of us in the Middle East. They are coming to Western countries, they are playing the victim card, and by doing so, they are silencing the actual victims of Islamic colonization and Islamic oppression in the Middle East, whether those victims are Jews, whether those victims are Iranians, whether those victims are the Yazidis, or so many other groups as well, right? So there's so many indigenous minorities in the Middle East, religious minorities as well, Christians and Coptics and others who have been victims of this Islamic colonization. So very interesting part there. So, for President Trump now to say that there will be peace in the Middle East one way or the other, and he says to peace after 3,000 years in the Middle East. Very interesting, because we all know, well, I mean, when I say we, I mean us Iranians anyway. We Iranians and those of us those who have been our allies on this journey to overthrow the Islamic Republic, we know that there will not be any peace in the Middle East unless and until the Islamic Republic is overthrown, um, and the Islamic Republic is thrown into the ash heap of history once and for all. And there's also something else. I want to find this, and I'm going to see if I can, peace in the middle. I'm going to see if I can find it and pull it up here. So the phrase peace in the Middle East, that's also a buzzword for the Iranian revolution because it's something that our leader, King Reza Pahlavi, has been saying for a very, very long time. He has been using the phrase peace in the Middle East for quite a while. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to play one of his interviews. So, this was from, okay, let me see if I can make this work. Is it working? Oh, look. Okay, you know what? I'm getting the hang of live streaming in StreamYard. I still need a second monitor to make it a bit more professional, but I'm glad it's working for now. So let me just play this. So this is an interview for King Reza Pahlavi. And guys, I am keeping an eye on the clock. So as soon as he goes live on YouTube, I will switch to that and I will broadcast it here so that we can watch it together. But here we go. So I'm just going to take this back to the beginning. So here's his interview with Maria Bartiromo about, how to get peace in the Middle East. So again, it's this coined phrase, peace in the Middle East, peace in the Middle East. He has been saying it. Prime Minister Netanyahu has started to say it, and now President Trump is now saying peace in the Middle East, right? Once and for all. We all know what the root cause of the issues are. The root cause of terrorism is in the Middle East. It's the Islamic Republic. So let's tune into this because I think this is going to be a very good segue into King Reza Pahlavi speaking at the Council on Foreign Relations. So here we go.
There is a deal here that would reintegrate Iran into the global economy that would be really good for the Iranian people, but would result in the complete cessation of any chance that they can get a nuclear weapon. That's option A. Option B is very bad. It's very bad for everybody, and it's not what we want, but it's better than option C, which is Iran getting a nuclear weapon. That is what is completely off the table.
And that was Vice President J.D. Vance yesterday at the Munich Security Conference in Washington, discussing the importance of making a deal with Iran and no nuclear weapon allowed. The comments coming as President Trump said that he believes the fighting with the Houthis is over. Watch.
As you know, we had a very good outcome with the Houthis, and we honor their word. I mean, they made a commitment, and we dealt with other countries that were close to them and their surrogates. And we honor all of their words. And we'll see what happens. I believe that hopefully that's over with and they'll leave the ships alone.
The next round of U.S.-Iran nuclear talks will likely be this upcoming weekend in Oman. But first, joining me right now is the exiled Crown Prince of Iran, the former, His Royal Highness Reza Pahlavi is here in studio. Your Royal Highness, great to have you.
Maria, thank you for having me again.
Thank you so much for being here. Give us your take on that, what you just heard, that the fighting with the Houthis is over. Should we believe that? And what about a potential deal with this current regime in Iran?
The past 40 years has demonstrated to everyone that has followed Iran that the demeanor and the pattern of behavior of this regime has remained consistent only in one way, and that is to continue fomenting regional instability and conflict as a means of its own survival by financing its proxies and utilizing them as an instrument of pressure or intimidation across the world. The Houthis are just one example of that. The majority of the funding came from Iran, the training, the weapons. So, it's not that they say we're going to quit the fight. Who is to say they're not going to start it again once Iran will start funding them again? Because this is what the regime is most likely to do. Khamenei said that this is a temporary setback, and he was forced into accepting the climate of indirect talks only to buy some time to the regime. They have done that before. So nothing leads us to believe that this time they have a complete change of behavior or attitude. And that's something that we should not fall into the trappings that this regime has set, not just to the current administration, but to previous administrations, and has always taken advantage of that in order to prolong its own survival.
I think President Trump is aware of the sentiments that you're making this morning, Reza. And I just wonder if, in fact, there is a different tact that this administration should be taking at this point. I mean, President Trump told me exclusively 2 months ago he sent a letter to Khomeini, and then they tried to mock that letter. What is the right approach?
No, the president was absolutely correct during his first administration. The campaign of maximum pressure paid positive dividends. It forced Iran to do a retreat, cut a lot of the revenue that the regime would have had access to. Unfortunately, it was reversed under the Biden administration. The regime had in excess of $200 billion it should not have had, which was, of course, spent on not the people of Iran who are starving on the streets, but by reinforcing their proxies. October 7th was not just a coincidence. It's a result of that continued funding of the regime of its terror network. That is the component that President Trump, during his first administration, understood. Now, and as I said many times before, including on your show, maximum pressure in itself is not sufficient to remedy the problem. There has to be parallel to maximum pressure, a policy of maximum support to the Iranian people. Now, why is this important? Vice President Vance is talking about reintegration. The Iranian people are your true partner in peace. They are the alternative to a warmongering regime that has called death to Israel and death to America since its inception. It's not just a slogan, it's an actual belief. The IRGC, as a stated mission, has to export this revolutionary ideology across the world. They are not there to sue for peace and coexistence with their neighbors or beyond. That's what is missing in the ultimate understanding of foreign governments looking into Iran as to what is the alternative here. Of course, Iranians want to be integrated in free societies because they share the same values of the free world, not this regime. So negotiating with a regime that in its own DNA is simply incompatible with such integration is a waste of time. And the regime is gaining by dragging the feet to prolong its existence, hoping that maybe they will survive this administration, only to come back again and continue its policy of radicalism and violence. So when you look at Iran, I think this administration and many other governments should look beyond the regime itself and look at what's on the streets of Iran, what's the demand of the people. The people who chant, they lie to us, they say America is the enemy. Our enemy is right here in Iran. That's what the people are saying.
Yeah.
So that's the big distinction that needs to be understood at every phase of any discussions going on.
It's a very important point, and that is why the people of Iran keep chanting for you to return. I mean, I want to get your take on regional partners and potential help from the region. President Trump is set to visit the Middle East next week. He told reporters yesterday he's yet to make a decision about potentially renaming the Persian Gulf. Watch this.
Referring to the Persian Gulf as the Arabian Gulf, are you going to make that announcement on your trip?
They're going to ask me about that when I get there, and I'll have to make a decision.
So you haven't made a decision
I
yet?
don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. I don't know if feelings are going to be hurt. Why have a case right over here? It's called Gulf of America. And I guess a lot of people
That
get
never
ideas
happened,
from
by
us.
the way.
But the Gulf of America was something I thought should have been named a long time ago. I'm going to be given a briefing on that. It was just done. Then I'll make a decision.
Your Highness, the Gulf of Persia sits between Iran and Saudi Arabia. It is strategically important for both nations. You wrote about this and tweeted about this yesterday. Tell us your thoughts.
Well, I mean, there's a video of President Trump, I think about 35 years ago, clearly referring to the Persian Gulf as the Persian Gulf, because he, like many other people around the planet for generations going to school, learned this body of water to be called the Persian Gulf. Has been the name for millennia, and that's the way it's going to be in the future. You cannot change a name strictly with a stroke of a pen. That's just a reality, and that's the end of the conversation. I don't think there's any argument to be made about how to call that body of water.
Well, the Iranian people took to the streets again. They are protesting this regime. They want their freedom. They know who their customer is in the Iranian regime. What do you want to say to the Iranian people this morning?
I think the Iranian people have a legitimate expectation that the free world that they look towards for help and support, the same world that promises values of freedom, of democracy, of human rights, of fighting discrimination of any form, represent an alternative to a regime that from the very beginning has repressed its own people, had murdered its own citizens. And it is natural for them to expect this from the free world. They get dissuaded, I mean, not dissuaded is the wrong word, but they get depressed over the fact that when they're chanting so courageously, and we saw that at least in the last couple of years since the Massa revolution.
Yes, of course.
That despite the repression, they're still there fighting without any help whatsoever.
Yeah.
Imagine what they could do if they had such support. Now, there's one element that I think should be part of the calculation. It's not just, as I said earlier, the concept of maximum pressure and support that will benefit the Iranian people in their fight for liberation. But understand that in any change of these kind of regimes, to put an end to this kind of totalitarian regime, we saw it in the Soviet Union, we saw it in South Africa and other systems, there's also a question of defections from the regime towards the people. And people will defect more likely from the regime towards the people if they took that pressure seriously and saw that this is an opportunity now to abandon ship. That's also very important. So I can understand diplomacy, but up to a point. And what I always said is that often we have heard diplomats in Europe and here say, if option A, which is diplomacy, fails, let's go straight to now, let's strike them.
Yeah.
What happens to the people as an alternative here? Why not give them a chance before you have to resort to more drastic measures? And that opportunity is right in front of our eyes. It's the people that represent the alternative and the distinction between the people of Iran and the regime.
Well, let's not forget, Iran has its own propaganda campaigns throughout the world, including America. The senator from Texas, Ted Cruz, calling on his alma mater, Princeton University, to dismiss a former high-ranking Iranian regime official who is currently still at the school as a Middle East security and nuclear policy specialist. Senator Cruz responded directly to him on X. He writes this: I try not to be in the room with people linked to Iranian terrorists who have murdered dozens of dissidents. Your books are unreadable. And the only debate you should be having is with DHS agents, Homeland Security, at the end of which you should be deported. Your reaction?
Look, Maria, in the early 80s, and I was witness to it, when many Iranian dissidents were assassinated on European soil as a result of some negligence and maybe a laissez-faire attitude that has now moved all the way and infiltrated the Western Hemisphere, including the United States. You know, when you think of a terrorist regime and its militia, you shouldn't only assume that they are in military gear with machine guns or hand grenades. Many of them are civilians infiltrating and penetrating think tanks, lobbyists, influencers, even universities. We shouldn't be surprised. Last week, they arrested 8 people attempting an attack on the Israeli embassy in England. This is part, again, of the pattern of behavior of this regime. As they're sitting down negotiating a deal with the American side, their elements are still at work.
Unbelievable. Quote, unquote, negotiating, right? Reza, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you again.
And for your leadership.
Thank you so
we
much.
Appreciate you joining us. Reza Pahlavi.
So let me just change this here. All right, I think I changed the title of my stream on X because we are getting close. Let me see if I did it properly here. No idea. No idea if it worked or not. All right, but so we're getting close to King Reza Pahlavi's speech that he's going to make at the Council of Foreign Relations. I'm keeping an eye on that. So as soon as it begins, I will let you know, and we will change to that stream. So this interview with King Reza Pahlavi was on May 9, so it was about roughly half a year ago or so. And at that point, he was talking about the Iranian people's desire to overthrow the Islamic Republic, and of course, take the country back and reclaim it. Now, there's a lot that has happened since then. One of the big things, and I haven't really spoken about this yet, but I'll mention this briefly while we're waiting for the live stream to start. Let me just make sure that I have the live stream going here on my phone so that as soon as it begins, I'll know to switch over to my laptop. This is why I need to get two monitors. But anyways, oh, am I hearing something? Let me see. I think oh, it's beginning.
Name and affiliation before asking your question. Thank you so much.
I'm not seeing the live stream here. Let me see.
Oh, they already have water. So can I hand you this? We already have water. Thank you.
What?
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to see you all here on a lovely Friday in Washington, finally. It gives me great pleasure to welcome to the Council on Foreign Relations, Reza Pahlavi. This meeting is on the record, so the usual council rules actually don't apply. Reza Pahlavi and I will engage in a conversation between the two of us for about a half an hour, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. And I just want to say that when I was a sixth grader writing an essay about the Iranian hostage crisis, I never imagined I would be sitting here with a fellow resident of Potomac, Maryland, talking about Iranian politics. Well, welcome to the council once again. Let's start out in the late 1970s. Iranians rose up and overthrew the regime that your father led. Why would they now choose to restore the monarchy? And what is your vision for Iran?
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be here in this prestigious gathering. I know the Council on Foreign Relations and their work over the years. I think I've had 2 or 3 occasions prior to participate in some meetings in the early 80s and then later on. So I'm glad to be one more time amidst this group. Look, I don't think this is about restoration or about a particular outcome. It's about democracy and self-determination. And I think whatever Iranians thought back then, if you listen to what the Gen Z of Iran says today about that generation, is what the hell were you thinking? And you put us in this mess. So how are we going to liberate ourselves now from what has been the net result? So I think today the viewpoint and the vision of Iranians who, by the way, have become more than ever aspiring to something that is, in fact, a very unifying theme, which is a sense of national identity against a regime that from the very beginning tried to crush every aspect of Iranian culture, history, from celebrating Nowruz all the way to other things. In other words, an Iranian renaissance against the most anti-Iranian regime we've ever seen. Not to mention the fact that it's been extremely repressive, and I don't think there's anybody in this room which would deny the fact that perhaps this is the most sinister regime we have encountered in modern history, that encompasses the worst of all the evil regimes we have witnessed. Totalitarian in one way, like the Soviet Union was, fascist in a way, like the Third Reich and the Hitler regime was, racist in the sense that the apartheid regime in South Africa was, and yet it's still sitting there, imprisoning the Iranian people on the one hand and threatening the stability of the world, including being a threat to this country's interests and national security. So long story, what is the perspective in Iran now? And why am I here? And what is my role? My role is not to run for office. I'm not. My role, however, is to maximize the chance for my fellow compatriots to be able to liberate themselves and decide ultimately via the ballot box and ultimately via referendum, what it is that they ultimately would like to have as a secular democratic government to replace this religious dictatorship. This is all our campaign, and this has been our struggle all these years. And we hope to be able to know that in this campaign, we're not alone, and we would have the support and the solidarity of democracies that are of the same viewpoints and values that we cherish, unlike a regime that stands totally against them. And that's what the fight is all about. Values of liberty, equality, human rights, versus a regime that has stampled on it from the very beginning. And that's the cause that we are all fighting today.
Let me follow up on that for a second, because I think you made a little bit of news in that statement. If the Iranian regime were to fall, however it does, you would not necessarily put yourself forward to lead the new regime. As democracy, you would be among candidates, or you wouldn't be a candidate at all.
Again, it's not being a candidate for the job of ruling. I've offered the role of leading this campaign of transition. Why? Because this is the ask of the majority of my fellow compatriots who have a trust in me to be able to play that role for them. So my job is to unify as much as possible the democratic opposition. My job is to bring as much support as possible to the people themselves. My job is also to mobilize as much as possible the diaspora. And this is based on a 5-point plan that I have initiated, at least in the last couple of years, which includes maximum pressure on the regime, which is something that the world is doing. Snapback is being re-implemented. That's one aspect of what external pressure could be. Maximum support to the people, meaning that parallel to a campaign of maximum pressure, there has to be an element of maximum support, assuming we want to go beyond appeasement. And this time, seriously consider that an end of this regime is ultimately the solution, but it's done at the hand of the Iranian people, not by means of foreign intervention or anything like that. So you need to be able to actually have an element of more direct support to the people, be able to also, as a consequence, encourage maximum defections from regime elements to the people, to minimize the cost of change to the Iranian people, and have a better chance of a smoother transition post-regime collapse than any other scenarios. And ultimately, and parallel to all of this, a plan of Iran prosperity and reconstruction, which is an IPP project that I've also launched about 2 years ago. So the combination of all of these is part and components of what we have done over the last at least 2 years. And I guess the question that everybody might have is, okay, we've seen several uprisings in Iran, at least in the last 5 years, the last one being the Mahsa Amini murder that triggered the Women Like Freedom movement. And why is it that until now we haven't really seen the ultimate uprising of people? And the simple answer is, well, this is an extremely repressive regime. And instead of restricting the regime in its abilities, it has in fact been emboldened by means of the wrong policies or approach, especially in the Western world. Again, appeasement. Again, the release of funds that they should not have had access to, that did not serve in the sense of helping the starving nation in Iran, but fortifying the proxies, arming them, equipping them. I would say that October 7th was not a coincidence, but all of this ties into what we can do to equal the playing field for the Iranian people. So this time they have an actual chance, should they commit to an ultimate campaign of uprising, not to be crushed yet again by a very repressive regime. And this is why we need to be able to work with the free world, those countries that understand the dynamics of change via civil disobedience and domestic uprising, as opposed to by means of war or foreign intervention or occupation, because that's not the direction we want to go at all. And that's why I say the change of regime in Iran is a very different scenario than what we've experienced in recent years since 9/11, what happened in Afghanistan or Iraq or anything else.
How do you've invoked the Iranian people and the Iranian diaspora? I want to get to that in a minute, but you've invoked the Iranian people any number of times. How do you, as a leader of this movement, and have put yourself forward to lead a transition, if not the country, how do you gauge the strength of the opposition to Iran, especially after the so-called 12-day war? It's hard for me to call it 12-day war. It just seems weird. But how, after that, there's been this wave of repression in Iran. So how do you know, sitting here, how strong the opposition is, and how do you know that they can be successful? I guess what I'm asking is, if you think it's strong, how do you think this is going to actually happen?
Well, information certainly gets to us. I mean, there are ways of circumventing the regime's attempt to curtail the ability of people to communicate. Social media has a big role to play in this, but also other challenges that are more safe for certain elements that would be in a position of giving us critical intel on what's happening on the grounds inside Iran, both on the domestic side, I mean, the civilian side, as well as the military and paramilitary forces. As a matter of fact, when I announced in a press conference in Paris, I don't exactly know how many months ago it was, but it was within this calendar year. That's where I announced a campaign where we will announce a QR code that people from inside who wish to cooperate or to defect from the regime can connect with us and share with us their information. And in the first few weeks, we had over 60,000 people who applied. I don't know what the number is now. It's probably greater than that. Information, of course, that needs to be vetted and analyzed to make sure that these are actually legitimate people, that we are not being infiltrated or penetrated by double agents. But that's very telling, because these are people who would be in the military, in the paramilitary, in the civilian bureaucracy. And the reason it's important is because the whole point of my strategy in this campaign of putting an end to this regime cannot not have a factor of maximum inclusion of elements that can survive regime change. And my default position has been anyone whose hand is not soiled with the blood of the Iranian people should have a possibility of seeing a place for themselves post-regime collapse. We don't want debathification. We don't want that mess. And of course, the Iranian people have the right to seek justice. And they will have their day in court, and those responsible will have to account for their crime. But majority of these people who are not part of this top echelon of the regime that benefits from these arrangements, it's a mafia that's just sucking the blood out of the Iran and its resources. Once they're out, those are the people who stand to face the music. Would they rather stand with a sinking ship, or do they think that this is the moment now to join with the resistance and the movement of liberation? And we are providing them an option so they are not in no man's land. That also depends on how the world responds to this phenomenon, because you cannot, on the one hand, ask people to defect and for people to rise if the world is still trying to negotiate yet another deal with this regime or push back or postpone this opportunity. And this window is open right in front of us right now, but it won't last forever. So we have to start calculating whether there needs to be a policy reset from a 4 decades long collective policy of the Western world, America and its European allies included, that has been mostly containment and appeasement, or we need to move to the next level now, because I think this regime has given far more chances to come clean, and they haven't. And how long do we want to kick the can down the road and say, not under my watch? This is really what we're facing right now.
I'm kind of digging the way history is rhyming here. We've gone from cassette tapes in the 70s to QR codes in the first quarter of the 21st century. I was going to ask you about the Iranian diaspora, but you mentioned something a couple of times about Western appeasement. So it's fair to say that, you know, that you are opposed to a new nuclear agreement should one materialize, or should there be negotiations for a new nuclear agreement?
Well, first, I don't see one coming, and I think we are past that point, because the regime right now is so brittle and so vulnerable that as a last resort, I don't think they will cave in. In fact, they might double down, and they have done that in the past. What leads us to believe that this time they say mea culpa, now we're going to be good guys? They had ample opportunities to do that. They were offered far better deals than the last offer they had received. We can rewind tape all the way back to the days of Khatami, and they still didn't take it. But the question should be, why didn't take it? It's because the DNA and nature of this regime is such that they cannot coexist in the same sphere of rationality of the world as we know it. Their entire existence depends on exporting this ideology. That was the entire purpose from day one. Khomeini, who then was championed as the person who would liberate Iran by those who led that campaign against the previous regime, could not have imagined what the consequences would be. But if he only had listened to a simple answer that he gave in an interview to a journalist as he was flying back in that 747 Air France Boeing to Tehran, and he was asked after 15 years in exile, what is your feeling returning to Iran? You know what he answered? Nothing. That set the tone of what Khomeini or this Islamic revolution was all about. It was not even about Islam. Because if you ask Iranian clerics today who are not part of the regime, never in our history has that particular faith been so damaged and people turning out from the faith. Right now in Iran, the largest, fastest growing religion is Christianity. We have over 1,500 underground churches in Iran. You all remember, talking about your article, that back then the first exodus of Iranians that were forced to exile were people who were immediately persecuted by the regime because they were Jewish or they were Baha'is and what have you. And yet they came to this country, many of them run this country, but they're dreaming of an opportunity to be able to help Iran again. And how good that would be for Iranians and how good it would be for this country. What stands between that future is this regime that continues to take hostages, that continues to fund whenever they can elements to bring more instability in the region. Bottom line, they are the ultimate problem. The Iranian people know that. Many people in the world are beginning to recognize that. The question is there the political will to do something about it? And that's the part that I'm afraid to say I have seen so far missing. I'm not saying it's going to remain like this all the time, but there needs to be a clearer process of making decisions. And I always remember two eras in history that marked and defined the world as we know it. One was during the Second World War, when you had Roosevelt and you had Churchill. And that combination ultimately put an end to the Third Reich. The second time around was Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher. They were able to bring an end to the Soviet Union. And of course, Gorbachev had a role to play in that, agreed. Today, the question is, we are faced with a situation where this very same Iranian regime that the British government tried to appease is stealing drone technology by sending students in British universities to transfer it back to Iran to serve the Russians in the campaign against the Ukraine, just on that front. What would be the prospect of a world where the whole region might be yet again dominated by another kind of superpower that does it in a different way? And I'm talking about China, obviously. Or for that matter, what happens right now in the symbiosis between the Iranian regime and Moscow when it comes to the Ukraine conflict. All of that being a situation where no Western leader has yet to identify the problem and the head of the snake. So we are trying to appease the biggest culprit that is a reason for all of this instability. And I don't understand at the end of the day, what's the rationale behind that formulation of foreign policy. I asked David Cameron when I was in London 2 months ago, why is it that you're not subscribing the IRGC as a terrorist organization? And his answer was, well, our basic thinking and the Foreign Office is we don't want to use our channel of diplomacy, which is our embassy in Tehran. Really? Didn't you use Switzerland as an interim or the Qataris for another reason? Do you really are telling me that you're afraid of subscribing the IRGC just because you don't want to lose a diplomatic channel with the Tehran regime? Come on. But that's one of the problems, among others. Anyway, I don't want to go.
I started out the question about nuclear negotiations. Would a post-Islamic Republic pursue nuclear technology, recognizing that much of the infrastructure is not workable at the moment? But there are still Iranian nuclear scientists. Yeah. There is know-how. I'm sure there are sites that the United States and Israel did not find. Would it pursue nuclear?
You know, from the very beginning, it just didn't make any sense for me to consider Iran as a country that would be in a situation to actually have nuclear reactors for a number of reasons.
But didn't your father start the program?
Well, I will explain. But let me. Okay, we'll go back. Yes, in the 60s, when we were starting to look at other sources to provide electricity and not use fuel only as a source for generation of electricity, you know, thinking more of the byproducts in petrochemicals and what have you. At the time, we started looking at different options. There were gas turbines who were not efficient enough at the time and rather expensive. solar energy, which was really its infancy, nothing to do what it could be today, and of course nuclear. And we came to nuclear because ultimately it was more cost effective, which is why Iran signed the NPT. We had shares in Framatome, which was, I think, the entity that would have provided the nuclear rods for the 2 first reactors that were supposed to come online in Bushehr in 1982. And of course, in the middle of all this revolution happened. That was the calculation back then. But when I look at Iran on a seismic plate, very little water and access to water in low population area, it just doesn't lend itself to it. And I think today there are so many technologies in renewable energy, solar being one of them, that Iran is a perfect candidate for, that we can certainly bypass that nuclear aspect in 2021, 25, as opposed to 1971 or 72. Anyway, that's my personal viewpoint. I leave it to the experts to assess that. I'm just sorry to see that billions and billions of dollars have been wasted on this program that has yet to generate any in any practical way electricity. But something that is even worse is that as far as the nuclear ambition program of this regime, it has cost our country over $1 trillion worth of loss or damage. So the whole narrative is shifting towards, let's be sane in mind, let's be concerned about environmental issues. And I've been spending a lot of time with Iranian entrepreneurs and American entrepreneurs, many of them in the fields of how can we best tackle this thing and Iran's energy needs and requirement. And more often than not, the nuclear issue doesn't even pop up, number one. Number two, I think that as far as the possibilities of having more impact in terms of Iran's economy, I think these other industries will provide much more immediate jobs for the country than any nuclear program would. But again, this is my personal opinion. So the future of Iran has to be on par with making sure that we are using the safest technologies, the ones that are most beneficial, and steer away from anything that could be subject to question. And we will operate in full transparency as we did before, unlike a regime that has never been transparent on the subject. And if you ask Grossi and the IAEA what's their take on the Iranian ambitions, they still won't be able to give you a clear answer. Reason more when you ask me about the nuclear negotiations. That's one of the issues. Can you actually trust them and what they tell you or what they commit to?
Let's go back to domestic politics in Iran. Your critics, my apologies, your critics, not me, they contend that, one, the Iranian opposition is terribly divided, and that the diaspora community is terribly divided, and that you've been unable to unite the diaspora community. So they question whether you'd be able to unite Iranians around a transition after the collapse of the Islamic Republic. How do you answer that question? What is the state of your movement, and how do you plan to unite Iranians who have very, very different views about a post-Islamic Republic Iran?
Well, for anybody who is interested in the facts rather than the narratives, I will point them to the facts. And the best fact that I can point them to when it comes to your question is last month when I was in Germany, we had the Munich conference, which was a conference that was the vastest and more diverse ever within the Iranian opposition in 46 years, including people from different walks of life, ideologies. Former Marxists and leftists were there, Republicans were there, representative of Iranian ethnic groups were there, representative of the latest wave of Iranian victims to the regime's repression during the Mahsa revolution, kids that were shot in the eye, their grieving mothers, they were all there. And it's on record for everybody to see. And the video is out there, you can go and study that. Yesterday, a new website was launched, which is the Iran Rising website. It was launched about 9 a.m. yesterday. As of 10:30 this morning, I asked one of my assistants what was the response. We had over 1.5 million views already in 24 hours. And people from inside Iran are putting their names out there to join this campaign and participate. If that's not an indication of unity and solidarity, I don't know what else I can put on the table as a proof to you people. So if you go and check that out, these are the facts, these are the measurables,
And it's on that basis that I would say Iranians are becoming far more united. The opposition is getting more and more organized in working together on a common agenda. And the response from inside has been, of course, the strongest ever. And the interesting thing is that I announced this platform on the day of a national celebration of one of our cultural days, which is Mehregan, which is the celebration of light. And we have never had this particular celebration as vivid as others, like Nowruz, for instance, or Yalda, which are other national celebrated cultural holidays. And for the first time in 46 years, Mehregan was at the widest possible scale celebrated in Iran. And that was also part of my call, let's do it on this day. I think that shows the connect, that shows the way people conglomerate and how they respond to me and my appeal to them. And these are all the measurables. Now, of course, some people hate my guts and don't like my face. I can't do anything about that. But I think that if you were to take an opinion poll in Iran, and in fact, there's a lot of data about that, surely a lot of people know that I'm, among anybody else, the most popular and the most trusted element, which is why they like to respond to me to be able to lead this movement for them.
Part of your narrative is that the Islamic Republic will come to an end. Now, forever is a long time, but it has demonstrated resilience that I think people did not expect. It's been under sanction for a very, very long time. This past summer, it took 12 days of pounding by the Israelis and then the United States. And the targets that the Israelis hit were not just nuclear infrastructure or ballistic missile production, but as we discussed, instruments of the regime's repression. Yet the regime seems to be stable and durable. Why should we expect anything other?
Well, first of all, you have a society that lives 60% of them under the poverty line. Let's not forget that in 1979, the rial was exchanged at 76 rials to the dollar. As of yesterday, is 1,180,000 rials to the dollar for the same nation with the same amount of oil and gas in its reserves. And this is before snapback kicks in. I don't see in what way that could be tenable for a starving nation on the one hand, and for the regime not to have access to this kind of revenue, and how the hell they're going to survive and maintain their war machine going on. It's just a matter of time. In that sense, it is vulnerable. I'm as curious as you are to see the effects of snapback and what would that bring into the issue. And I think it's also the further isolation of Iran, because if you look at what may happen as a result of whether or not Hamas will accept the deal or not, then I think that this will be a time to see to what extent internationally the regime is also more than ever isolated and curtailed. These are the actual dynamics in front of us. One is domestic, one is on the international scene. And I think we can, on that basis, say that if whatever until now has helped the regime somehow manage to survive, but at the end it will fall. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. And the real issue is, and I remember the end of the Cold War, not many nations, particularly in the West, were prepared for the aftermath of the collapse of the Soviet Union. The mindset was the Berlin Wall might be around in our lifetime. That's what I thought, by the way, and yet it fell. But were we prepared for the aftermath? This is one of those cases that I urge a lot of you to say, regardless of the status quo, you have to factor in that there could be a change. And if that change were to occur, are we prepared for it? Not to fall in the same problems in the post-Soviet Union collapse that was not necessarily anticipated. This time we can anticipate. And in fact, this is the answer to a lot of people who keep saying, we don't know what's going to be happening after the regime collapse. Is it going to be more chaos? Is it going to be more instability? Blah, 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 blah. And I think that we have enough data and actual measurable resources, both at home and abroad, to prove to you that Iran is not a country where you would face a vacuum or civilian strife. Iran is not Afghanistan. Iran is not Iraq. It has its own dynamics, its own polity, its own civil society, although heavily
repressed, but certainly alive and well. And I think it is that element that can provide you that what you're investing this time on is not a change of behavior by a regime that you cannot trust at the end of the day, but liberate a nation that see eye to eye on the same visions and principles and can be an actual partner over there. America by itself cannot and will not be able to maintain global stability without having some partner in that case. Yes, the Abraham Accord was a good start. Clearly, it was sabotaged by the Islamic regime for obvious reasons. And I've been saying this, and I said this when I was in Tel Aviv 2 years ago in a press conference, that if we elevate the Abraham Accords to the Cyrus Accords, meaning that a different Iran that is committed to regional peace and cordial relationship with our neighbors will be the element that will seal the deal and allow for that process to take place. So we don't have to worry about the relationship between Tehran and Jerusalem and Riyadh and all the other countries in the region. On the contrary, we create an environment that is conducive to maintaining even more stability and encourage economic development, everything that our country needs. And it cannot happen so long as this regime is there. And the regime knows that. It's just trying to buy time. Its ultimate tactic has always been buy time, hoping that there won't be a Trump in the White House, or there won't be somebody that will be more aggressive as opposed to appeasing. That's what they've been doing as a tactic. And I think the Iranian people see through it, and I hope people outside the world begin to see through it as well.
Thank you. Well, we have exhausted my questions that I planned to ask. So it's now your opportunity here. Let's start way in the back was the first hand I saw, and then we'll work our way forward in the room. Please identify yourself. Thank you.
Welby Layman with Walmart. You describe an Iran that would be secular and pluralist. One of the areas of pluralism is, of course, a plural set of opinions about secularism versus Islamic Republic versus maybe other options. Are there hybrid options or other ways of maximizing respect for that sort of pluralism?
Look, separation of church and state in my book is a prerequisite to actual democracy, and we have had the proof of it in numerous different Western democracies. The degree of laïcité, as the French will say, may vary a little bit. In France, you cannot even wear an actual symbol that defines your faith, whether it's the Star of David or Allah or the cross, whatever it is. In America, you can. There may be some differences, but the important element here is a clear separation of church from state. That's definitely a foregone conclusion in Iran. In fact, it will be in the advantage of the Shiite faith as well. And most of our clerics will recognize that the minute you start giving a privileged treatment of one ideology, whether religious or otherwise, it's the beginning of discrimination from the Dead Start. So the only guarantee in that sense is equality under the law, liberty of opinion, of expression, or faith, of ideology. And as long as the Constitution, as the law of the land, ensures that, that's where individual liberties and equality of citizens under the law can be achieved. And that's exactly what Iranians are pursuing. So that's very important to understand, that we are not going to be in any form or shape questioning the fact, because in Iran, we don't have the problem that some people in the West may have. The minute you question radical Islam, you're treated as someone who is perhaps Islamophobic. That's nothing to do with Islamophobia. It has to be the understanding that there are many Muslims around the world that are moderate, that are not radical, but there are some who are. And they are the problem behind the mess we see today. And we recognize that our country is the first victim of it, because they try to impose it on us and take us hostage in the first place. So whether or not a French citizen or a British citizen or an American citizen ultimately gets it, the Iranian people now have gotten it all the way. Today's Gen Z is totally aware of these dynamics. They don't have a problem with the fact that a secular Iran doesn't mean that we are anti a faith or another. It simply means we respect and we would like to have freedom of religion in our country. That should be the first guarantee. And that will explain why, because of this regime, many Iranians of other faiths had to flee the country because of immediate persecution. But in tomorrow's free Iran and secular Iran, those rights and guarantees, the same liberties of Iranians that had to seek asylum in countries that offer them that liberty would like to be able to have the same liberties back home. And that's exactly what we're trying to do. The very same liberties that we enjoy here, we should be able to enjoy them back in Iran itself.
I know I said I was going to work from the back to the front, but I feel compelled to call on the gentleman right here in the front. So compelled on a variety of levels.
Mike Froman, President of the Council, thank you for being here. When you envisage a possible uprising, how do you assess the relative importance of factors like economic deprivation, desire for democracy, desire for more just day-to-day social freedom, and something you mentioned in passing, ethnic tensions, the non-Persian elements of Iran, the Turkic, the Azeri, the other populations, the other minorities that may feel aggrieved. How do you see the various drivers of a potential uprising being assessed?
Well, again, a lot of what we have seen in recent years, gathering of Iranians around Cyrus the Great's tomb in Pasargad, all the way to the Mahsa Amini uprising, and basically the slogans that have been used or chanted in Iran as early as last week, I mean, as late as last week, and throughout these years, it's all pointing to a collective national, if you will, slogan. And they keep saying, you know, from Zahedan to, I don't know, the other side of the country, our life is dedicated to this cause of liberation. We get our country back. The country getting back is for all of them, whether you are from Balochistan or from Kurdistan or from Azerbaijan. It transcends anything that would be otherwise considered that, is this really sectarian or is it really national? You know, Iranians as a whole have always felt as part of that country for centuries. We never had this issue that this regime has created before the revolution. Nobody would walk the street and say, oh, this guy is Muslim, this guy is Jewish, this guy is Baha'i, or so on or so forth. Our national team was comprised of representatives of various faiths and religions. It was our national team. Everybody was Iranian. Iranian Kurd, Iranian Azeri, Iranian Jew, Iranian Zoroastrian, and so on and so forth. And I think the same spirit of our national identity binds us all together. So I'm very comfortable and very confident that the minute all those who were disenfranchised, and yes, the regime was the cause for discrimination, whether it was ethnic discrimination, sexual discrimination, religious discrimination, or any other type of discrimination, that they will find again in that future the fact that nobody will ever feel unequal next to somebody else. And that's the whole spirit that gels them together. And they understand that they have to pitch in and contribute. They cannot just sit back and expect it to be handed to them on a silver platter. Kennedy once said, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you could do for your country. And what you can do for your country right now is the basis of incentive that brings the people together. They find each other, they respond to one another, they chant together, the slogans are coordinated, and it's very representative and very diverse. So that's one thing. And I think ultimately the course is, you know, I always, and that's the reason for IPP, Iran Prosperity Project. What is the roadmap to recovery? What are the immediate issues that we need to tackle to make sure that, first of all, the transition is stable, that the economy will be stable, that will have elements that considers all these factors, short-term, mid-term, and ultimately long-term. That's what really is the tangible elements for people to understand in what way they can benefit from this change. Because liberty, human rights, and democracy is, as we would say here, motherhood and apple pie, but does it actually put food on the table? And if we explain how and the country can get restarted and what are the preconditions, then I think the average person, particularly those who are most affected in areas that has been the most impoverished, Balochistan is one, Kurdistan is one, will understand how they will benefit as a result. So rather than being in a sense of resisting change, they know that it cannot get any worse than what it is right now. and there's light at the end of the tunnel. But it requires collective participation. The call for a national uprising simply doesn't mean that somebody is going to come and, bring it on a silver platter. It's a call to a sense of responsibility and contribution and collective action. So everybody has stake in it. It's their campaign. It's not my campaign. It's their campaign. It's a national campaign that transcends any type of grouping, whether it is on ideological basis or ethnic reasons or what have you. It transcends all of that. And that's our collective cause. And that's why I think the Munich conference was successful. Because at the end of the day, we call for very simple fundamental principles for all of us to agree on to be able to work together. Iran's national territorial integrity is critical. Again, individual liberties and equality under the law is one of the core principles. Separation of church from state or religions from government is a very important prerequisite. And of course, and last but not least, the right for the Iranian people to be able to freely determine their own future by means of free elections, which is why the constitutional process is part of the dynamics of political change and what will come in the future. That has been the basis of this platform that has bring all these diverse elements together. And we saw that and the success of that conference in Munich. And it's on that basis that we are regularly now progressing. I'm sure I will get much more data through the website. We just launched not even 2 days ago. It's in initial phase. And the response has been tremendous. It's not a one-way conversation. People are sending already ideas, plans, suggestions, progress, and all of this will be something to be monitored. The English version of the site should be up fairly soon, and all of these articles will be translated. So you will be able to see how people are responding and are contributing to this. That's are really the measurables that will be able to let you understand and actually feel the dynamics of this process and how people are responding to it and how they're working together. And I think that's a very big element to satisfy those who still have doubt whether or not the Iranian people are ready and able to do whatever it is that is asked from them to do at this time.
Right here in the middle.
Hi, I'm Leslie Warner. My question is, usually in social movements, what's so interesting about social movements is that ones that are successful is that a lot of times they're leaderless, which makes them more difficult to combat on the part of the regime in power. And what you've described is a very, very diverse array of people, which I think is a huge strength. And it appears that they're mobilized by opposition to the current regime. My question is, when the regime falls, what actions do you think need to be taken to maintain the cohesiveness of that group? Because what we've seen in other cases of regime transition and general political transitions is that there's a lot of cohesion against the regime, and then there's a bit of a vacuum sometimes that can be filled by often nefarious actors, while the civilians get their act together and try and figure out how they're going to move forward. So once the element of the regime that you are all opposed to is gone, how do you maintain cohesion among a diverse array of actors?
Thank you.
That's a great question. Actually, again, one of the first elements and projects that IPP has been focusing on is the first 100 days. The regime has collapsed. What do we do the first 100 days? How is the composition of that interim governance be composed of, and by whom and with whom? To what extent there is a leading team that offers that transition, the advisory team, preparing the stage for the election of people's representative at the Constitutional Assembly, which should be ultimately the methodology of determining ultimately what future secular system people want, so that they can start drafting the text of that constitution that will be offered to the nation by means of referendum to ratify or not. All of these elements in detail are being, as we speak, discussed, not just behind closed doors. In fact, IPP has given a 45-day period for people to respond to that, chime in, critique it, tweak it, So everybody agrees on the mechanics of that change and who has what role in it, whether you are representative of a political organization or you are an activist or you are an economic expert or a legal expert, so on and so forth. What I think is very important is that I don't think we have too much of an issue in the sense of people questioning whether or not this should be the course. The issue is more making sure that we are not missing an element that could be a challenge. For instance, when you look at truth and reconciliation, what happened in South Africa, when we are thinking about transitional justice, what do we do with the remnant of elements that are in the regime and have to face justice? What needs to be done in terms of incorporating the majority of the civil bureaucracy and the people who, of course, are taking sides with the movement and are now moving away from the regime. These are the actual mechanics and details that are, I think, important for us to be able to ensure a smoother transition. And I think the majority of the groups I've talked to, whether they're monarchists or Republicans or in the center or the right or the left, are not right now campaigning as a political party to win an election to form a government. They're here understanding that we need to make sure that we have a common platform to make sure that that phase is managed successfully and prepare themselves so the day when we will need to conduct elections to form the next government, our political parties are ready to step in and, like in any other democracy, have their own campaigns, and ultimately a winner is decided that forms the future government, whether it's a president or prime minister. So I think on that course of action, the priority lines are defined, what we do in this phase between now until the regime collapses, but particularly what needs to happen immediately after that. So I think that this process means that it is acknowledged and accepted by the majority of the participants. So it's not like in the blind. It's not like, okay, we are discovering something new. And the reason we're trying to be as transparent and as clear as possible, it's because unlike what happened in 1978, when the majority had no clue of what would be the outcome of this regime, this time we're not saying, let's just get rid of this regime, then we'll see what happens, which is what they were saying at the time. Let's get rid of the Shah, then we'll see what happens. But this time we say, what do we need instead? How it's going to be done? And here's the mechanics of it. So everybody understands from day one, every step of the way, in a very transparent way. And I think that's an element that in fact solidifies the unity rather than people being doubtful and take exception. At least that's the method we have implemented, and it has paid off.
Right here, Barbara Slavin.
Thank you very much. Hi, Barbara Slavin from the Stimson Center. Two questions. You have expressed a lot of support for sanctions, yet we see that Iran, which had a large middle class until about 2010, 2012, has seen its economy collapse since the imposition of so-called maximum pressure. This means people are poorer, it's harder for them to come out in the streets. What makes you think more maximum pressure is going to achieve the desired results? And the second—
One question, Barbara. One question.
I have to ask about your identification with Israel and whether you think that is appropriate.
Please.
Okay.
One question. There's lots of people who want to ask questions. Go ahead.
Well, look, the Iranian people don't blame the West for their poverty. They blame the regime and everything it has done to bring them to the stage at which they are right now. I think it's only the apologists and the contrarians for the regime narrative that told this line that, oh, sanctioning the country is bad, and this is going to impoverish the people. Look, we are in a war against this regime as Iranians, and we are willing to tighten the belts to survive. Our problem is not assuming the sanctions. Our problem is every time we had a chance, they've been thrown under the bus. They've been thrown under the bus under the Obama administration. They were in the Green Movement. They were thrown under the bus by the Biden administration after the Mahsa movement. Are we going to be thrown under the bus yet again? Because as long as this regime is there, the economic situation is going to continue. But once this regime is gone, there comes the opportunity to come out of this misery. What has delayed our liberalizing ourselves from the misery is because of the wrong policy of your governments. Because the chief culprit is Khamenei and his regime, and you're not doing anything to help us get rid of him. Not because you care about us. Just think of your own interests. Have you achieved anything? Have they given you everything that would be justifiable in terms of realpolitik, if there's any of it? Or diplomacy as a means to suggest that, okay, we're willing to negotiate, but nobody takes responsibility of it, and you kick the can down the road yet again, which means other Iranians on a daily basis being killed. Look, in the last month alone, we had 100 executions. In this calendar year, over 1,000. This is an ongoing thing. Much more important than whether or not they can afford to put food on the table. Their kids are being murdered every single day. That needs to change.
Okay.
Well, I've said what I need to have from the world. Solidarity. The same solidarity that dissidents in the Soviet Union were expecting from the Western free world. The same solidarity that South Africans wanted to put an end to apartheid. The same solidarity that helped Lech Walesa and his friends overcome Jaruzelski. What else is different in Iran? The same solidarity. And we don't see it in the case of Iranians. We've seen always the same approach of appeasement and negotiations, endless buying time by the regime, and nothing was achieved as a result. Until this attitude and viewpoint is not reset, the Iranian people will continue to be starving. Not because you're imposing sanctions. That makes it more difficult for the regime to fuel its old machine. But it will keep them still longer in power, and that will not change the game. The game changer is for the regime to be gone. And when we say regime change, it's because we understand that it is because of the regime that we are in this misery, not because of external factors. This regime is directly responsible to put Iranians in the mess it is. That's why we want, as Iranians, this regime to no longer be there. And we question whether the world see eye to eye with us that this is ultimately the solution, as opposed to think that you can still manage them, contain them, humor them, appease them, pay hostage bribes to them, and encourage their behavior as they have continued to have. Because you haven't changed their behavior. In fact, you have encouraged their behavior as means of this appeasement.
Sir.
Hi, my name is Josh Mogul. I'm from a Jewish diaspora community in Great Neck, New York, where you are very popular. We love you. My question for you is, the Supreme Leader, there might be an election soon, and how would you respond?
Say again,
If the Supreme Leader were to pass away and there would be an election soon, would you consider announcing a transitional government and seeking formal government support from other governments? Thank you.
Look, our campaign is not based on whether or not Khamenei is in power or not. That's irrelevant. Because whatever the regime attempts to manufacture post-Khamenei, to the level we see already fraction and division within the system, and there will certainly be more after his demise, then I think that in fact makes it even more likely for a quicker resolve of that transition. Because while he's still holding the fort, he still maintains some degree of command, he still has some eminence over the whole structure, but the minute he's gone, the system will implode from within. Obviously, our behavior and attitude vis-a-vis how do you contend with all of that is not to confront the regime directly in terms of, let's say, armed struggle or things of that nature. I still believe in the school of thought that civil disobedience and non-cooperation and non-violence is a better way, A, to consider the fact that people will have less of a cost in achieving that end. Two, I don't see many scenarios of political change that are brought by means of violence that ends up with a democratic outcome. And three, in fact, I think that if we achieve that by telling the people who are still sitting there deciding on when to join the people, rather than see themselves threatened, they see themselves as part of the solution. Again, encouraging maximum defection. And that momentum can help us bring it to the level that the biggest element, in my view, that will be the final nail in the coffin of the regime in the sense of paralyzing it from within by Iranian action, not by means of foreign sanctions, are nationwide labor strikes. That's why I keep saying that there has to be a dual approach to the problem. Relying on external sanction alone is not the solution. And by the way, let's not forget, all these sanctions was always with the premise of thinking that as a result, the regime will change its behavior. Whereas it's not behavior change that you should seek. The solution is still regime change. But it's important to have the outside component, but the outside component by means of maximum pressure is not sufficient. You have to have a domestic element, which is why I've been calling for maximum support for the Iranian people. And I think the combination of these two will also lead to maximum defections, because now there's a dynamic in play. It's not just on paper as a concept. It's an actual measurable thing.
We're starting to run out of time, so I want to take the last two questions and then have Reza Pahlavi answer. Sir, right here, and then right here, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Kevin Sheehan from Multiplier Capital. Assuming that the regime were to collapse, what would happen on day one in terms of the provision of security? Would you expect the military and the police to transfer their loyalty to some new transition government, or would you expect help from the GCC and other friendly neighbors and allies? Thanks.
Great. Yes, right here. Yes, please.
Thank you very much. Shireen Hunter, Georgetown University. I have to, first of all, say that I do share Your Highness's vision for Iran. A secular Iran, a nationalist Iran, where the focus and the order of priority is Iran and not Islam or some other kind of transnational aspiration.
With respect, Shireen, if you could get to the question.
I will get to the question. I'm sorry, Steve, but you know, there are some preliminaries have to be said. My more important, however, problem with the way you are approaching is because you were very young when the 1979 revolution happened, but I was a diplomat of my country, and I felt the whole weight of the tragedy of that. Everybody there was also gathering together, the communists, the mujahideen, the Mossaddeqists, and so on. And they were hoping that they're going to have a democratic government and so on. We saw what happened when your late father left. Immediately after that, of course, the regrets began. However, all these opposition groups began to fight among themselves like cats and dogs. Now, why are you so optimistic that the same kind of thing is not going to happen? Because let's face it, there is an element that you forget, and that is element of power.
That's the question. Why are you so optimistic?
One last word, please, Steve. The other thing is that Iran's condition actually now is much more fragile. Iran has predatory neighbors, including Turkey, which wants the dismemberment of Iran. And also the state of Israel would like Iran to be divided up. So why do you think that everybody is just going to sit on their hands and allow the Iranians to get rid of this regime? We have never tried to change regime behavior through real engagement.
Thank you.
So why don't you give that a chance?
Thank you.
I'm not sure ultimately what the specific question is, because that's almost like
I think, you know,
one course.
My first job in Washington was a research associate at CSIS, and Shireen Hunter, she was a force of nature then, and she's still a force of nature now. I think
and I totally forgot about the first question.
The first question.
Maybe you can remind me. Yeah, and then we finish with that.
And the other question about in the immediate aftermath security, if we can do it in about 35 seconds. Okay. Why are you optimistic?
Was the first question?
That was Shireen's first question. Okay. Was why are you given the history of the revolution?
Right.
And there was lots of hope for real progressive change. Why are you optimistic that this time, if the regime were to collapse, that you would have a different outcome? You would have a more democratic, open society in Iran, that it wouldn't revert to some sort of authoritarian
I think the biggest element that gives me confidence is not what the elite says, but what the grassroots says. Today, Iran's grassroots, the people on the streets, by the millions across the country, are chanting death to the dictator. In 1978, what drove the agenda was not the masses on the streets. It was certain intellectual circles, mostly the Marxists and the Islamists, who found some interest in common against the previous establishment, that drove the narrative. Some remnant of those still exist, but they're irrelevant because the grassroots have passed way beyond that point. The millions of Iranian youth today, the Gen Z of Iran today, is very clear on what it wants and what it doesn't want. And at the end of the day, they are the ones who will define the future. Not some think tank in Washington, not some reporter in such a newspaper here or in Europe, but the people on the streets. And those within the Iranian intelligentsia, academic centers, activists, civil society, advocates, lawyers, doctors, scientists, who catch up to that ask and that demand and are here to serve what these people at the end of the day want for themselves, are going to be the factor that would determine it. If everything we said right now was sort of crafted or engineered or designed in some office, in some building, writing a script for a country, I would have said, sure, maybe we don't know what the hell we're doing. All I'm doing is facilitating and maximizing the chance for that grassroots to succeed. So the real question is, can we actually help that grassroots fulfill their dream and aspirations to freedom? That's what it's all about. And that's what my campaign is there to reinforce and maximize their chance to succeed. And that needs to be understood. And I hope I can convey that to all of you, that this is what it's all about. Remember, what is the ask of the millions of Iranians who are fed up with this regime? And do they deserve better than what they have?
We are unfortunately out of time. My apologies to Kevin back there. Thank you very, very much for spending some time with us this afternoon. It's been a fascinating discussion. I'm looking forward to running into you at the Giant in Potomac Village. And thank you all for your time. Thank you.
Wow. So my initial thoughts on this was, of course, it was a fantastic interview by King Reza Pahlavi, the leader of Iran's opposition. He answered all the questions expertly. It also gave for the non-Iranians watching this, I hope it gave you a good here, let me just
This is an inspired ghost.
let me just wait, what's going on here. Sorry, still working on how to do the live stream stuff. So I hope for the non-Iranians that gave you some insight into the propaganda and the nonsense that we Iranians have been dealing with for the last 47 years. And you saw that with the two so-called journalists who showed up. The first one was, of course, Barbara Slavin, who she blocked me a while ago because I called out her nonsense on X. And then, of course, this other woman, Shireen or whatever. I think I have her blocked as well. But I want to go back, and I'm going to play both of those, and I'm also going to share King Reza Pahlavi's response to each one. And I want you to notice something. When you go back and rewatch the entire interview with him, Israel never came up. I mean, the Iranian Revolution, like our movement, has absolutely nothing to do with Israel. We Iranians have been fighting to overthrow the terrorist Islamic Republic for the last 47 years. Sorry, my allergies are acting up here. So we've been fighting to overthrow the Islamic Republic for the last 47 years, nothing to do with Israel. And yet, as you noticed, those two bad actors who are on the payroll of the terrorist Islamic Republic immediately brought up Israel and brought up these lies or whatever the case may be. And you could even tell from the way they were speaking, both of them were incredibly hostile, and both of them wanted to ask like millions and millions of questions. And it was very interesting to watch. I mean, you can easily spot who the bad actors are, and I have a feeling that the reason they were so hostile is because they know that the writing is on the wall. They know that the end of the Islamic Republic is near, and everything is culminating, right? Everything is kind of coming together. You have President Trump with his final countdown for Hamas, which, by the way, is a message to Khamenei as well, right? So it's the deadline, the Sunday deadline isn't just for Hamas, it's for the Islamic Republic as well, because the Islamic Republic has not agreed to the peace deal. Now you have King Reza Pahlavi, who's at the Council of Foreign Relations, and he's speaking about what Iran will look like post-Islamic Republic. And he mentioned a website. Let me bring up the website really briefly just to show you. Here, let me go share screen. There we go. Okay, so let me add that. I'll come here. There we go. So actually, I wonder if I, there we go. This looks better. So this is the website that was launched yesterday. Is it showing? Wonder how this works. If I go back and forth, picture in picture layout. Okay, so this is the website that was launched yesterday, and it has, it has thousands and over 1 million views, so far. Now he did mention in his interview today that they will be launching this website in English very soon, so that non-Iranians will be able to follow along. As soon as this website is launched in English, I will do a live stream and I will go over this website and I will explain like every aspect of it, because this website is historical. We are literally watching and living through the Iranian revolution on social media using technology. So there's the website, but let's go back. I'm going to pull up, how do I do this? I'm going to pull up the stream, and I want to go back to Barbara Slavin. Let me just find that here. Like, this is just like a horrible, horrible woman. And she has written so many articles for the Islamic Republic, basically trying to whitewash, whitewash. Let me do this. Where is it? There we go. Is that working? Perfect. Okay. So this woman has basically tried to whitewash the crimes of the Islamic Republic for a very, very long time. She is on their payroll. And that's one of the things that a lot of non-Iranians need to understand, is that the supporters of the Islamic Republic are not necessarily Iranian. In fact, I would say the vast majority of outside supporters of the Islamic Republic are, let me just, repeat this. The vast majority of the supporters of the Islamic Republic are not Iranian, those who are outside of the country, okay? So you have lobbyists, you have pundits, you have academics, you have journalists, you even have politicians who are not Iranian, but they are on the payroll of the Islamic Republic. And their job is to literally try to normalize relations between a brutal totalitarian dictatorship that is arguably the worst dictatorship in the history of mankind. And they try to normalize that dictatorship. And the reason that we call them reformists is that they push this reformist narrative. And we'll get to the second woman, that second woman named Shirin, where she spoke about reforming the behavior of the Islamic Republic. We will get to that in a moment, because that's exactly the reformist narrative that these people have been pushing. And it worked. It worked in the past. So it worked with Carter, it worked with Obama. I mean, these people that you're seeing right now, Barbara Slavin, like that horrible garbage woman, and then the other Iranian woman, Shirin, whatever her name was. If someone catches her name, let me know what her name is, because I've seen her around somewhere. She's part of the whole NIAC group. But these people have been around for a very long time. They were the ones who were pushing the JCPOA, right? So they were the ones who were convincing Obama and other Western politicians that the Islamic Republic can be reformed. That, if you negotiate with these demonic Islamic terrorists in good faith, that you can change the Islamic Republic from within. In 47 years, that has not happened. The Islamic Republic is brutal. They are terrorists. They are an Islamic dictatorship. When they chant death to America, they literally mean death to America. Okay, so you cannot trust these people. And yet, what they do is they engage in taqiyya, right? Taqiyya. So they say one thing in Farsi, they say another thing in English, and then they pay people to go out there and be their apologists. So Barbara Slavin, I pray that when Iran is free from the clutches of the Islamic Republic, that you will pay for your crimes against the Iranian people. I think you should be put on trial. I think you and that Shirin woman, Shirin Hunter, thank you, Persian Immortal, you and Shirin and Trita Parsi and every single one of you reformists and lobbyists and propagandists for the terrorist ayatollahs, you have blood on your hands, and I hope that you will get the justice that is coming to you. I pray that that's going to happen, because people like you, and I'm going to play the clip right now so you can see exactly who it is I'm talking about. People like you and others, you are part of the reason that the Islamic Republic is viewed as a legitimate government by the West instead of the brutal Islamic dictatorship that it is. Because we Iranians, we know the truth. We see what they're like. We see their speeches. We see how they operate. They literally gas school children. The Islamic Republic will poison Iranian schoolgirls in order to prevent their parents and discourage their parents from going out in the street and protesting to overthrow the regime. So then when these disgusting garbage people like Barbara Slavin and the Shireen person and others come out and they're like, think of the children, think of the children. Where the hell were you when the Islamic Republic was murdering our children? Where have you been for the last 47 years? You have been getting paid by the Islamic Republic to promote their Islamic jihad, to maintain their legitimacy. You don't care about the Iranian people. You are using my country of Iran as an ATM. Shame on you. So let's watch this clip again, and we're going to listen to this garbage terrorist woman speak, and just look, you can even tell from her body language how frustrated she is, how angry she is, and how evil she truly is. So just watch this. Here. Let me play this again.
The mechanics of it. So everybody understands from day one, every step of the way, in a very transparent way. And I think that's an element that in fact solidifies the unity rather than people being doubtful and, you know, take exception. At least that's the method we have
coming up.
Implemented, and it has paid off.
Right here, Barbara Slavin.
Thank you very much. Hi, Barbara Slavin from the Stimson Center. Two questions. You have expressed a lot of support for sanctions, yet we see that Iran, which had a large middle class until about 2000.
So before I continue, so this sanction narrative that they use is part of the Islamic regime propaganda. So they just throw the word sanctions out there, and then they say, oh, you support the sanctions, you're an enemy of Iran because you want the people to be poor. The reality is the sanctions have actually nothing to do with the Iranian people. The sanctions have to do with, like, you know, military and weapons and, you know, nuclear and things like that, right? So the sanctions prevent militarization. The sanctions have nothing to do with the economy of Iran. The reality is that even before the sanctions, the Islamic Republic has been stealing money from the Iranian people and using it to fund terrorism. The leader, the supreme dictator of the Islamic Republic, Khamenei, Khabar Margesh, Khamenei is worth $80 billion. How the hell is this disgusting, inbred, uneducated Ayatollah worth $80 billion? They steal money from the Iranian people. And the reality is, and King Reza Pahlavi even said this in his response. He says that at least 60%, I think the number is close to 70%, but at least 60% of the Iranian people live below the poverty line. That has absolutely nothing to do with the sanctions. However, this whole sanctions narrative is something that the people who support the Islamic Republic have been pushing since it was implemented, even though we as Iranians, we want the sanctions. Why? We want the sanctions because the sanctions will weaken the Islamic Republic. A weak Islamic Republic is what will allow Iranians to overthrow the regime. You're never going to get Islamic regime supporters who are on their paycheck, you know, someone like Barbara Slavin. You're never going to see her come out and express this reality, because they rely on the ignorance of people. They rely on just using a buzzword, sanction, sanction, sanction. Oh, if you're for sanctions, you're against the Iranian people. So there you go. So for her to bring up this sanction thing and try to claim that, you know, so what she's essentially doing is she's trying to attack the credibility and legitimacy of the leader of the Iranian opposition, King Reza Pahlavi, right? So that's what she's trying to do here. Why is she doing this? Because the Islamic regime and their supporters know that the only alternative to the Islamic Republic right now is King Reza Pahlavi. He has the vast majority of support. I would say close to 80% of Iranians in Iran and around the world support King Reza Pahlavi and want him and are rallying around him, right? So the reason that our movement to overthrow the Islamic Republic is growing exponentially is because of this man right here, King Reza Pahlavi. That is why they're attacking him. So even like the premise of this question is false, because she just goes ahead and without any proof or anything claims like she's basically insinuating that because he supports economic sanctions against the Islamic Republic. Remember, the Islamic Republic is a terrorist group that's occupying Iranians. She's saying that because he supports economic sanctions against the Islamic Republic, then he is necessarily not good for the Iranian people. When in fact, what we Iranians have been saying for a very long time is we want sanctions. We want the Islamic Republic to be sanctioned because when you sanction our oppressors, that gives us, the Iranian people, an opportunity to overthrow them because they have become weak. Someone like Barbara Slavin, who works for the Islamic Republic, she has been pushing this alternative narrative, this false narrative, right? Just go and search her up, go and look at her articles. All she talks about is how we need to, or not we, she talks about how the United States needs to normalize relations with a terrorist organization that yells death to America. She talks about how the sanctions are hurting the Iranian people. No, but she never talks about the abject poverty. She never talks about how the Islamic Republic spends billions of dollars on terrorist organizations, right? So she's literally working for the regime. So with that context, I'm going to go back, I'm going to play that question and just listen to all of the factual inaccuracies in her question. And what is really frustrating for people like Barbara Slavin is that 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when she was writing all of this Islamic regime propaganda, there wasn't social media, there wasn't live streaming, there wasn't an ability for the Iranian people to counter her narrative, right? Like, she was being paid and propped up by the Islamic Republic. So all of these propagandists, they were basically filling up the space, whether it was in the news, whether it was in academia, whether it was in other places. And now, because of social media, because of someone like me, who basically just set up this live stream, and I'm streaming, and I have over 2,000 people watching, both on X and on YouTube. And this is without any sort of funding or anything like that. It's literally me sitting in my living room, in front of my laptop, speaking about this. I am able to counter the narrative of the terrorist Islamic Republic, and not just me, but millions of Iranians like me on various social media platforms, right? And this is what has them scared, because we are calling out their nonsense. We are calling out their propaganda, and we are saying enough is enough. So I'm going to go back, I'm going to replay this. Watch her, watch how frustrated she is, watch how angry she is, and watch how she just automatically, for some random reason, turns to Israel, right? And again, she's exposing herself, because this whole narrative, this propaganda, this jihad against Israel, it comes from the Islamic Republic. She works for the Islamic Republic. So there you go. And you should always ask yourself, why is some random white woman supporting the Islamic Republic? Why does some random white woman care so much about whether or not the Islamic Republic stays in power? I will tell you why, because she is not a random white woman. She is someone who is on the payroll of the Islamic Republic. And there are hundreds, if not thousands, of people like Barbara all around the world. There is no legitimate reason for a non-Iranian person to be so defensive and supportive of the terrorist Islamic Republic. Literally none. No one cares about the Islamic Republic unless they are on the payroll of the Islamic Republic. Let's go back and we'll watch this again.
Than people being doubtful and take exception. At least that's the method we have implemented, and it has paid off.
Here she comes.
Right here, Barbara Slavin.
This is a terrorist supporter.
Thank you very much. Hi, Barbara Slavin from the Stimson Center. Two questions. You have expressed a lot of support for sanctions, yet we see that Iran, which had a large middle class until about 2010, 2012, has seen its economy collapse since the imposition of so-called maximum pressure. This means people are poorer, it's harder for them to come out in the streets. What makes you think more maximum pressure is going to achieve the desired results? And the second—
One question, Barbara. One question.
I have to ask about your identification with Israel
and
whether you think
Barbara,
that is appropriate.
Please.
Okay.
One question. There's lots of people who want to ask questions. Go ahead.
What a psycho. Like, what a psycho. But his response is perfect.
The Iranian people don't blame the West for their poverty. They blame the regime and everything it has done to bring them to the stage at which they are right now. I think it's only the apologists and the contrarians for the regime narrative that toe this line that, oh, sanctioning the country is bad, and this is going to impoverish the people.
I really, really enjoy this part because he's basically calling her out, right? Like he doesn't say she's one of them directly, but he's calling out her nonsense and he's referring to the contrarians and the people who are promoting that lie that I just spoke about. So let's go back if you didn't catch that. Like he basically calls her out on her nonsense, right? Here, let me just go back and we can play that again where he calls her out.
To the stage at which they are right now. I think it's only the apologists and the contrarians for the regime narrative that toe this line that, oh, sanctioning the country is bad, and this is going to impoverish the people. Look, we are in a war against this regime as Iranians, and we are willing to tighten the belts to survive. Our problem is not assuming the sanctions. Our problem is every time we had a chance, they've been thrown under the bus. They've been thrown under the bus under the Obama administration. They were in the Green Movement. They were thrown under the bus by the Biden administration after the Massa movement. Are we going to be thrown under the bus yet again? Because as long as this regime is there, the economic situation is going to continue. But once this regime is gone, there comes the opportunity to come out of this misery. What has delayed our liberalizing ourselves from the misery is because of the wrong policy of your governments. Because the chief culprit is Khamenei and his regime, and you're not doing anything to help us get rid of him. Not because you care about us. Just think of your own interests. Have you achieved anything? Have they given you everything that would be justifiable in terms of realpolitik, if there's any of it? Or diplomacy as a means to suggest that, okay, we're willing to negotiate, but nobody takes responsibility of it, and you kick the can down the road yet again, which means other Iranians on a daily basis being killed. Look, in the last month alone, we had 100 executions. In this calendar year, over 1,000. This is an ongoing thing.
Yeah, that's, he makes a very good point. In the last month alone, over 100 executions by the Islamic Republic. Over 1,000 people have been executed in the last, like since the beginning of the year, since January. 1,000 people have been executed. Where are these people? Where's this like Barbara Slavin vampire woman? Why isn't she speaking out about this? She doesn't care. She does not care. These people are contrarians. More than that, they are paid propagandists by the Islamic Republic. Their only role is to legitimize the existence of the Islamic Republic and to attack King Reza Pahlavi. Their only role, that is what they're getting paid for. They want to attack and they want to protect the Islamic Republic. And why do they attack King Reza Pahlavi? They attack him because he is the only person who can overthrow the Islamic Republic. The King of Iran is the only person that has the legitimacy and the trust and the support of millions of Iranians in Iran and around the world. Again, like at least 70% of Iranians support him. I would say the number is much higher, but I'm trying to take a more conservative estimate. 70% support is unheard of. I mean, I was a politician for 7 years. When I got elected the first time, I had just over 50% of the vote, and that was considered huge. I mean, prime ministers in Canada become prime minister with only 33% support, right? So think of it, 33% support in a democratically elected country, you can become prime minister. This guy, King Reza Pahlavi, literally has over 70% support of Iranians in Iran and around the world to lead the revolution, to overthrow the Islamic Republic, and to lead a transitional government until we get to the ballot box where we as Iranians can determine through a referendum what sort of democracy we want to have. Do we want to have a constitutional monarchy, do we want to have a republic? Now, I personally am a huge fan of constitutional monarchy. I've said this before, I'll say it again. I was a politician in Canada. Canada is a constitutional monarchy, so I am a huge fan of constitutional monarchy. I want this man to be the king of Iran. That is my personal goal. That is what I am campaigning for. However, I do respect his wishes that this has to be determined through a referendum. I know how I'm going to be voting in that referendum, but here's the thing. We are not there yet. We are not even at the point where we can get to a referendum. However, the fact that we as an Iranian nation are even speaking about this, and the fact that now you have Western politicians, non-Iranian politicians and governments and journalists and academics who are speaking about the day after the fall of the Islamic Republic, is that the writing is on the wall. Why is the writing on the wall? Because of this man right here, because of King Reza Pahlavi. He has been trying for 47 years, and we finally have the momentum. And part of the reason that we have the momentum is, and he mentioned this several times in his speech today and in his comments, he referred to Gen Z, right? So the Green Movement was the first time there was real sort of momentum to overthrow the Islamic Republic. That was during my time. I'm a millennial, so that was around 2012, I believe, or just a little bit earlier than that, if I recall correctly. So the Green Movement is when there was the first real sort of concerted effort. That came with the millennials. That was my generation. But unfortunately, it wasn't enough. The millennials, we were just not enough to get to that point. However, now that Gen Z has grown up, it's really become the millennials and the Gen Z that are the driving force of the desire to overthrow the Islamic Republic. My understanding is that, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's somewhere along the lines of like 70% of people in Iran are below the age of like 40 or something. I can't recall, but like the millennials and Gen Z make up a huge active part of the Iranian population, and we have united in a way that the Islamic Republic never imagined could happen. And let me put it this way. I was born in 1985. I'm 40 years old. I was born in 1985. The Islamic coup d'etat happened in 1979. So I was born in an occupied Iran. My generation have never seen a free Iran, right? I don't know what a free Iran looks like. All I know is based off of what I've seen in photos, in videos, in documentaries, in the history books, right? And thank God that we have like so much footage, right? And not just like documentaries, even like TV shows, right? So many things from before. So we have all seen, even though we have never experienced a free Iran, we know exactly what a free Iran looks like. You would think, right? You would think the Islamic Republic assumed that our generation and future generations, because we would grow up in like an Islamic dictatorship, that we would just grow up worshiping Allah, Muhammad, and the Ayatollahs and all that garbage. But instead, the exact opposite happened. The one thing that the Islamic Republic has been successful in doing is turning my generation, the millennial generation, and all the future generations, that includes Gen Z and Gen Alpha, turning us away from Islam, turning us away from religion, turning us away from this Islamic dictatorship thing. They have made us fiercely nationalistic in terms of our Iranian identity, right? So the reason that we are their worst nightmare is because they thought they could raise a generation of indoctrinated people. Instead, it's the exact opposite. They have created at least 3 generations of Iranians who want absolutely nothing to do with religion, nothing to do with Islam, nothing to do with the Islamic Republic, and we are the ones who are overthrowing the Islamic Republic. We are the driving force behind the desire to free Iran, and we are the ones who want our king to return. That is the worst nightmare, because the Islamic Republic thought that by getting rid of our monarchy, by getting rid of the Pahlavi dynasty, they would erase our desire for a free Iran. That's why they are terrified of this man, because King Reza Pahlavi represents 2,500 years worth of Iranian history. Iran is the oldest country in the world. It's over 3,000 years old. And prior to the Islamic Republic, the coup d'etat, it had the longest running monarchy, right? It was the longest running monarchy. And I'm going to put it out there, Iran still has the longest current monarchy, because as soon as his father passed away in 1980, when Shahanshah Aryamir passed away, Reza Pahlavi, his son, swore the coronation oath in Cairo. Did you know that? Let me find that, and I will bring it up. Let me just find this here. So it would be, wait, here we go. Here we go. So share tab. Here we go. So you see that? So this is October 31st, 1980. This is Reza Pahlavi. So, you know, the gentleman that we were just watching in the video, we're going to go back to him. Here he is in 1980. As soon as his father passed away, you can see in the Kubbe Palace in Cairo, October 31, 1980, Reza is 20 and officially succeeds his father. So October 31st, 1980, a few months after his father's death, an emotional but determined Reza Pahlavi holds a press conference in Cairo where he assumes the responsibilities as Roi du Jour, aka King Apparent, upon his 20th birthday. So this is the reason why the Islamic Republic is afraid of this man. Here he is in 1980. I wasn't even born. I wasn't even born in 1980. I was born in 1985. Here he is swearing the oath, taking on the responsibilities of the Shah of Iran. He did this knowing that he was going to be doing it for the future of Iran. He did this before I was born, before the Gen Z was born, before Gen Alpha was born. He took this oath because he was thinking about the future of Iran. And here he is today. Here he is today. This live interview we just watched, this is 45 years later. The momentum has grown. When he swore the oath back in 1980, the people who would support him unconditionally were not born yet, but he did that because he had the foresight to know what was going to happen in the future. The reason that Iran is going to be free is because of this man right here. That is why the Islamists are afraid. That is why they are attacking him. That is why they are trying to delegitimize our movement. And I will tell you one thing, Iran will be free because of our king. And he is the worst nightmare of the Islamists. That is why they attack him. That is why they attack his supporters. That is why they try to spread lies about him. You just saw Barbara Slavin, the Islamic Republic puppet, you know, spout her garbage nonsense, trying to go after him, and he called her out beautifully. So let's go back. Let's listen to him. Let's, you know, finish this, and then we're going to go to the other woman, the other Iranian woman who's a communist. Again, you can just see like how these people are they're losing it. They're losing it. They're all over the place. They're angry. They're frustrated. They can't even keep to one question. And it's interesting because they're so flustered, right? And they feel like they know that they're losing the narrative, and that's why they can't even keep to like a respectful question. They have to go on and pontificate on their garbage and their nonsense. And that other woman brought up Mossadegh. Mossadegh is like the communist uh, traitor Russian asset, right? And he answered it. He answered it all beautifully. So let's go back and finish listening to his answer.
Much more important than whether or not they can afford to put food on the table. Their kids are being murdered every single day.
Yeah.
That needs to change.
Okay.
Well, I've said what I need to have from the world. Solidarity. The same solidarity that dissidents in the Soviet Union were expecting from the Western free world. The same solidarity that South Africans wanted to put an end to apartheid. The same solidarity that helped Lech Walesa and his friends overcome Jaruzelski. What else is different in Iran? The same solidarity. And we don't see it in the case of Iranians. We've seen always the same approach of appeasement and negotiations, endless buying time by the regime, and nothing was achieved as a result. Until this attitude and viewpoint is not reset, the Iranian people will continue to be starving. Not because you're imposing sanctions. That makes it more difficult for the regime to fuel its old machine. But it will keep them still longer in power, and that will not change the game. The game changer is for the regime to be gone. And when we say regime change, it's because we understand that it is because of the regime that we are in this misery, not because of external factors. This regime is directly responsible to put Iranians in the mess it is. That's why we want, as Iranians, this regime to no longer be there. And we question whether the world see eye to eye with us that this is ultimately the solution, as opposed to think that you can still manage them, contain them, humor them, appease them, pay hostage bribes to them, and encourage their behavior as they have continued to have. Because you haven't changed their behavior. In fact, you have encouraged their behavior as means of this appeasement.
Sir.
He makes a very good point there that I want to reiterate. So he says that the reason that Iranians are experiencing poverty or everything else is because of the regime. That's 100% true. Even when it came to the 12-day conflict between Israel and the Islamic Republic, you never saw Iranians in the West go out and attack synagogues or blame Jews or Israel, anything like that. Of course, the pro-Hamas crowds did, and the Iranian communists did, but they're a very, very small minority. But you never saw any sort of organic mass anti-Israel demonstrations by Iranians. In fact, what you saw instead were solidarity rallies between Israelis and Iranians. And the reason that you saw those solidarity rallies is because we as Iranians, we know, first of all, that the war was not between Israel and Iran. The war was between Israel and the Islamic Republic. It was Khamenei. And this was a war that was started by the Islamic Republic 47 years ago when they took our country of Iran hostage and declared jihad against Israel. This war was started at that point, and it was continued through their proxies, through Hamas, through Hezbollah, through the Houthis. This is a reality. And that is why, to this day, there is no enmity between Iran and Israel. There is enmity between the Islamic Republic and Israel, because the Islamic Republic is an Islamo-fascist dictatorship. There are a bunch of jihadi terrorists who yell Allahu Akbar and jihad and all that, nonsense or whatever. But there is no enmity between Iran and Israel. And this is why I'm a big stickler about differentiating between Iran, which is what I am. I'm Iranian. I'm from Iran, versus the Islamic Republic. Oh my God, this guy's talking about Operation Ajax and blah, blah, blah. That's such a stupid thing. The CIA was only 5 years old at the time. I don't know. I don't buy into this Operation Ajax nonsense. The only source for that is the CIA itself. No one buys that. So, keep this Operation Ajax nonsense away from, I'm not here to entertain conspiracy theories at that point. Mossad had nothing to do with the Islamic Republic taking over. In fact, if you look at the history, Israel tried to warn Jimmy Carter about not supporting the Ayatollah. But I mean, take these Jewish conspiracy theories elsewhere. This is not the place for it. I'm not interested in your Jewish conspiracy theories. So I'm just gonna like block you because I don't. This is not the Jewish conspiracy theory space. There's so many of those out there. Go join like, I don't know, Tucker Carlson or Candace Owens or something. This is I'm not going to deal with that nonsense here. Anyway, so this is why the Islamic Republic is so afraid of King Reza Pahlavi, because he has maintained that legitimacy since the passing of his father, and he is here to overthrow the Islamic Republic, and he has the support of millions and millions of Iranians, especially those of us who were born after the Islamic Republic took over. Those of us who were born after the Islamic Republic took over, those of us who have always been, have only seen an Islamic Iran, we are the ones who are fighting to go back to what Iran was before. We are the worst nightmare of the Islamic Republic, especially those of us who live outside of Iran. And we know what it's like to live in a normal democratic country. Myself, I was raised in Canada. That's what I want for Iran. I want Iran to be a free, normal, democratic country, preferably, a constitutional monarchy with this man, King Reza Pahlavi, as king. That's what I'm fighting for. But this is something that the Islamic Republic never expected. They never expected at least 3 generations of Iranians, and I'm including Gen Alpha in there. If anything, I would say Gen Alpha is even more patriotic than the other 2 generations. And that's because Gen Alpha is being raised by the millennials, right? So you have patriotic parents, and then you have ultra patriotic children. So the Islamic Republic is over and done with. And that is why you have these people attacking King Reza Pahlavi. So let's go to, I want to go to the next, where is it? There was someone else.
of violence that ends.
The crazy woman.
I'm Kevin Sheehan from Multiplier Capital.
Your late father.
Here we go. Okay.
I felt.
So this is like this crazy communist woman. Again, like, I mean, so this woman here, God, so this woman who's gonna speak right now and ask her a question, she is part of the, we call them Nasl Panjo Hafti, which means like the generation of 57. Of course, 57 is the Islamic calendar. So in English, it would translate to the 79 generation. So she's part of the 79ers who essentially overthrew the Shah, right? So she is, when we talk about the army of the red and the black, so let me just change this here. So when we talk about the army of the red and black, right, you have the black being the Islamists, and then you have the, wait, why is this person still here? Okay, I don't know, maybe that person came back in. I removed them again. So the army of the red and black, you have the Islamists, which is the black, and then you have the communists, which is the red. The reason that the Islamic Republic was successful in overthrowing the Shah and taking control is because back in 1979, they had the support of the communists, the so-called, intellectuals, which they're not actually, but it was these communists, right? And when you listen to her ask her question, she's going to bring up some names. She's going to bring up Mossadegh. Mossadegh was this evil person who was a Russian Soviet KGB asset. And basically, he tried to turn Iran into a Russian proxy, a communist proxy, which was, then he was subsequently stopped by the Shah at the time, his father. And I can do a whole space live stream on Mossadegh at another point. But she refers to him, and then she refers to the MEK. The MEK is an Islamic, they are a Marxist Islamist cult, right? The MEK is more, Mossadegh was not democratically elected. Oh my gosh, this is like, how is this person still here? Like, how are you able to come in? Like, I don't understand. Mossadegh was not democratically elected. Mossadegh was appointed just like every other prime minister. And by the way, all these people who say, oh, Mossadegh, they cannot name a single other prime minister of Iran. What about Hoveyda? No one ever talks about Hoveyda. No one ever talks about how Mossadegh's supporters in 1979 murdered Hoveyda, right? So, I mean, it's always like do not try to Iran-splain my country to me, okay? Like, don't come in here and pretend like you know anything about Iran and then try to Iran-splain my country to me by pushing this Russian disinformation and propaganda. And I see the Iranians in the chat are responding to him. I mean, yeah, Mossadegh was a communist traitor. I've tweeted so much about him. And you know, I will do a whole other space on Mossadegh if you guys want. I will totally like go through the whole thing. But I'm telling you now, like, when it comes to this Mossadegh garbage nonsense, like, we're so sick of it. Like, he is one of the most hated Iranians in all of Iran. Like, Iranians hate this man. The only people that seem to support him are the conspiracy theorists, or, you know, the people who support the Islamic Republic. So here we go. This woman, she's going to talk about how, like, the communists wanted a democracy. How the hell did communists want a democracy? It makes absolutely no sense. Here, let me show you who the communists were in 1979. Let me go to my feed because I've tweeted about this. Let me find it here. I've spoken about this before. I've tweeted about this. Okay, like, here we go. Let me switch this. Here we go. Do you see this? Do you see this woman? This is the MEK, okay? This is the MEK. How is this guy like coming in here and swearing? This is so weird. Anyways, I just banned and removed his comments again. That's so bizarre. I don't know how he's doing it. Anyway, so this is the MEK. So the woman who's about to ask the next question, when she says, "Oh, the MEK want a democracy," does this look like someone who wants a democracy? Does this crazy woman here with her like crazy headscarf and her like literal like communist propaganda, in what reality have communists ever wanted to have a democracy? Literally none, right? But this is the propaganda that they promote. This is the garbage narrative that these people promote. They basically just throw out these names and they assume that no one knows who they are, or no one's going to question them on it. Now, perhaps, you know, 15, 20 years ago, when they pushed this communist propaganda, non-Iranians wouldn't push back because they wouldn't know any better. You know, you would assume that when an Iranian speaks about something relating to Iranian history, that they're telling the truth. I'm here to tell you they're not. So this woman who's about to ask the question, she is literally a communist. Okay, so she hates the Shah. She hates, you know, everything. She is working with the Islamic Republic because, again, these people were with the Islamic Republic, and together they overthrew the Shah in 1979. So this is a weird person. How is this person still commenting? Anyway, whatever. I guess I'm just like, I guess they're really upset by the truth. It's so bizarre. Anyway, so these are the people who helped to overthrow the Shah at the time and brought in the Islamic Republic. Does this person look like someone who wants a democracy? And yet, this is the garbage nonsense that we Iranians have been dealing with for 47 years. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to play the question. And when that like crazy woman starts like spouting about Mossadegh, and then she talks about the MEK, this is what she's referring to right here. It doesn't get much clearer than that. Literally, you see the communist sickle and hammer. And what's even more insane is that these people aren't just communists. They're Islamic communists. Now you might be asking, how does that make sense? How can someone be an Islamic Marxist? Because isn't Marxism about not having religion? Normally, I would say, yes, you are correct. However, this is the level of IQ of these people, right? Like their IQ is so low that they don't even understand what communism is and what it signifies. So these people, like this is one of those like weird Islamic death sex cults. I'm not even joking. And by the way, they call themselves mujahideen, which means fighters of jihad. So in what reality can a group named Fighters of Jihad want a democracy that's secular? Does that make sense to you? Of course not. So let's go back. I'm going to play that woman, that, you know, the communist woman asking her question. And she's literally going to say in her question that, oh, the mujahideen, she's like, these people wanted a democracy. These people. Let's go back and watch that. Like this is the insanity that we deal with.
To transfer their loyalty to some new transition government, or would you expect help from the G?
Let me go back. Okay, here we go.
Iran and not diversity.
Government, or would you expect help from the GCC and other friendly neighbors and allies? Thanks.
Great. Yes, right here. Yes, please.
Thank you very much. Shireen Hunter, Georgetown University. I have to, first of all, say that I do share Your Highness's vision for Iran. A secular Iran, a nationalist Iran, where the focus and the order of priority is Iran and not Islam or some other kind of transnational aspiration.
With respect, Shireen, if you could get to the question.
I will get to the question. I'm sorry, Steve, but you know, there are some preliminaries have to be.
She's so hostile. Like, what preliminaries need to be said? Who are you, first of all? Like, who the hell are you that you feel the need that you need to pontificate and give some sort of preliminaries? Literally, no one cares about you. No one cares about your opinion. But this is how the Islamists and the communists try to take control of the narrative, right? So you can see from her expression, like فشار خونش رفته بالا, یعنی داره میترکه. Sorry, I said that in Farsi. So it's like her blood pressure has gone up, right? Like she is so frustrated because this is her worst nightmare. As a communist, this is their worst nightmare, right? Like look at the evil, like the anger in her eyes, right? Like her head's about to explode, right? Because these communists are losing the narrative. So for her to even feel the need to, like, you know, and then she's so rude. She's so rude, right? Like the guy cuts her off. He's like, just get to the point. She's like, no, there are preliminaries. And like, really? But this just goes to show you these people are losing the plot and they don't know what to do. They're going insane because they're losing the plot. They don't know what to do about it. So they're trying to now infiltrate those spaces where King Reza Pahlavi is. And if you, I'll go back and, you know, we'll play together that interaction. If you go back and you look at it, like, and we'll listen to the question, but the question is more about attacking him, King Reza Pahlavi, than it is about the Islamic Republic. Here, let's do this.
I have to, first of all, say that I do share Your Highness's vision for Iran. A secular Iran, a nationalist Iran, where the focus and the order of priority is Iran and not Islam or some other kind of transnational aspiration.
With respect, Shireen, if you could get to the question.
I will get to the question. I'm sorry, Steve, but you know, there are some preliminaries have to be said. My more important, however, problem with the way you are approaching is because you were very young when.
Wow. So the most important problem isn't the Islamic regime. Her most important problem is not a brutal totalitarian Islamic dictatorship that literally murders on average 3 Iranians a day. The most important problem isn't the fact that Iranian people are under occupation by a brutal Islamic dictatorship. Her most important problem isn't that these ayatollahs are stealing billions of dollars of Iranian money and leaving the country destitute. Her most important problem is Reza Pahlavi. Did you catch that? Like this is the level of insanity. This is people talk about Trump derangement syndrome. Let me introduce you to Pahlavi derangement syndrome. These people have Pahlavi derangement syndrome, and it's been going on for decades. Decades, I'm telling you, like not even starting with the current Shah. It goes back to his grandfather, Reza Shah the Great, who we call the father of modern day Iran. This Pahlavi derangement syndrome goes back decades, like it goes back 100 years, and you're about to witness Pahlavi derangement syndrome. Here we go.
National aspirations.
With respect, Shireen, if you could get to the question.
I will get to the question. I'm sorry, Steve, but there are some preliminaries have to be said. My more important, however, problem with the way you are approaching is because you were very young when the 1979 revolution happened, but I was a diplomat of my country, and I felt the whole weight of the tragedy of that. Everybody there was also gathering together, the communists, the mujahideen, the Mossaddeqists, and so on, and they were hoping that they're going to have a democratic government and so on. And we saw what happened.
So again, so she literally said the communists were gathering, hoping to have a democratic government. In what reality? I'm sorry. In what reality do communists have a democracy? Can anyone point to me a single democratic country that is run by communists? Does that even exist? This is the idiocy that we Iranians have been dealing with for 47 years. Do you see this? This level of idiocy and ignorance where this woman, by the way, Reza Pahlavi was 18 years old at the time that the revolution happened. So for her to claim that he was this young child is bogus. And I can tell you that at 18 years old, he had more experience, life experience, education, and qualifications in his pinky finger than this communist idiot woman has had her entire life, right? So, I mean, I don't know, like the very fact that she just said that communists wanted to have a democracy, it just negates everything. Like she made a fool of herself. And I think she also exposed herself in front of all those people, communists. And then she says the MEK, again, remember who the MEK are. This is the MEK. This is the MEK right here, right? So she literally just said that these people here, this crazy woman, wanted a democracy. Can you believe that? Like this is the nonsense. This is the propaganda. And then she mentions Mossadegh. Again, Mossadegh was a communist who was affiliated with all of these people. So in literally in one breath, she says the communists and the mujahideen and Mossadegh wanted a democracy. Isn't that like the level of idiocy that we have to deal with as Iranians? It's just part of the Pahlavi derangement syndrome. So there you go. Like it just like these people, they're exposing themselves because they're desperate. They know the end is near, and they know that the Iranian people have made their choice. They're going to support King Reza Pahlavi. He is going to free Iran. We are going to have a secular democracy, and I have a feeling, I would say I'm 100% positive that we're going to go back to a constitutional monarchy because that's what Iranian people want, and we're going to return our king. We're going to return our king. So here is this crazy woman. I'm going to just go back so we can listen to her craziness. But now, like you can see here, like I think just based on that one premise alone, where she starts off her question, by claiming that the communists wanted a democracy, I'm pretty sure everyone in the room was just like, okay, like she's just a crazy woman at this point. Because like, in what reality do communists ever want a democracy? Here we go.
When the 1979 revolution happened, but I was. Thank you very much. Shireen Hunter, Georgetown University. I have to first of all say that I do share Your Highness's vision for Iran, a secular Iran, a nationalist Iran, where the focus and the order of priority is Iran and not Islam or some other kind of transnational aspirations.
With respect, Shireen, if you could get to the question.
I will get to the question. I'm sorry, Steve, but you know, there are some preliminaries have to be said. My more important, however, problem with the way you are approaching is because you were very young when the 1979 revolution happened.
He was 18.
But I was a diplomat of my country, and I felt the whole weight of the tragedy of that. Everybody there was also gathering together, the communists, the mujahideen, the Mossaddeqists, and so on. And they were hoping that they're going to have a democratic government and so on. We saw what happened when your late father left. Immediately after that, of course, the regrets began. However, all these opposition groups began to fight among themselves like cats and dogs. Now, why are you so optimistic that the same kind of thing is not going to happen? Because let's face it, there is an element that you forget, and that is element of power.
That's the question. Why are you so optimistic?
One last word, please, Steve. The other thing is that Iran's condition actually now is much more fragile. Iran has predatory neighbors, including Turkey, which wants the dismemberment of Iran.
So this argument, I'm going to stop right here for a moment. This argument that she puts out there, you know, oh, the Balkanization of Iran, separation. This is also a narrative that's been pushed by the Islamic Republic. And, you know, so basically the Islamic Republic has been saying for 47 years that if we leave, then Iran will be Balkanized, and, you know, all these different countries are going to come in and, you know, tear the country apart. It's going to be like another Yugoslavia. And so that's why the Islamic regime has to stay in power so that we can prevent Iran from breaking up. Again, that's, you know, just one of the, it's Russian disinformation. It's just Islamic regime propaganda. This separation narrative literally does not exist in the country. Iran has existed as a country for over 3,000 years. And for some reason, the Islamic Republic thinks that Iranians have short memory and that we're going to forget this. So for her to bring up this bogus narrative, this is one of the arguments of these bad actors. It's something that has been pushed for a very long time. And at this point, it's a sign of desperation. So this woman, she is a bad actor. She has the blood of millions of Iranians on her hands, because instead of attacking the Islamic regime, she is attacking the king of Iran. She is attacking the legitimate leader of the Iranian opposition. And, you know, as she said earlier, her more important question is about the legitimacy of the king of Iran and his efforts to overthrow the Islamic regime. So, I mean, this all goes back to the Pahlavi derangement syndrome that these people have, right? Like, to me, at this point in the game, the writing's on the wall, and anyone who is more focused on attacking the leader of the Iranian national uprising, anyone who's more focused on attacking the king as opposed to attacking the Islamic Republic, at this point is an enemy of Iran, is an enemy of the Iranian people, and she's only in it for the money. So she just cares about her paycheck. So let's continue.
And also, the state of Israel would like Iran to be divided up. So why do you think
the state of Israel wants Iran to be divided up? Again, it's so easy to spot the enemies of the Iranian people that, like, just totally came out of the blue. And you know, it's a common element of the far left, you know, because this woman's clearly a communist, right? Like she just flat out in the beginning said that the communists wanted a democracy, which is not true. But it is an element of the far left, no matter which part of the world, you know, they are or they're from. There's always that anti-Israel sentiment, and you know, the Iranian communists are no different. So you know, in 1979, when the communists joined the when the communists joined the Islamists to overthrow the Islamic regime, communists were very anti-Israel, very anti-Semitic, and you're seeing this again. Like, when did Israel ever say they want to balkanize Iran? So for her to like just bring that up randomly out of the blue with no facts, with no evidence, it's insane. What she is trying to do is she's trying to attack the king and his efforts to, or not his efforts, his successful effort in normalizing relations with Israel. I don't know if you guys are aware, but just a few weeks ago, the king's team was actually in Israel meeting with Israeli officials about how to, you know, save Iran once the Islamic Republic is overthrown when it comes to its water crisis. Prime Minister Netanyahu, in his speech at the UN, said, "Make Iran great again." Nowhere in the policy of the Israeli government is it to balkanize Iran or break Iran up. So for her to throw that out there, again, it just shows how desperate these people are. And it just goes to show that these people are just scrambling, trying to find something to hold on to. Again, like this is just what they do. So it's also very interesting to me that instead of criticizing the Islamic regime and criticizing the Ayatollahs, she's instead criticizing the king and criticizing Israel. The Pahlavi derangement syndrome is insane with these people. Let's just finish this off, and then we'll get to his question, because King Reza Pahlavi, his answer is fantastic.
Think that everybody is just going to sit on their hands and allow the Iranians to get rid of this regime. We have never tried to change regime behavior through real engagement.
Thank you.
So why don't you give that a chance?
So that's another thing. She says, we have never tried to change regime behavior through real engagement. Actually, the reformists, and she's a part of the reformists, have been pushing this reformist narrative for 15, 20 years, and it hasn't worked. This is another line from the Islamic Republic. So for her to criticize the king for saying that you shouldn't negotiate with terrorists, that should let you know, that should clue you in that she's also on the Islamic regime's payroll, because you cannot reform a totalitarian dictatorship that murders its own people, right? So what she's basically saying here, like the equivalent would be like someone during World War II basically criticizing America and saying, why are you going to war with Hitler? You've never actually actively tried to engage with Hitler and try to get them to change their regime policies, right? Like that's exactly what they're doing. So she is a very disingenuous person, and for her to promote that regime change narrative, like she's on the side of the Islamic regime, because Iranians, especially inside the country, have made it very clear they do not want the Islamic regime. They do not want a reformed Islamic regime. They do not want any sort of Islamic regime. They want to overthrow the Islamic regime. They want to end the Islamic regime. They want a completely new regime. They want a completely new government that has absolutely nothing to do with the Islamic Republic. That is what people inside of Iran are saying. So for her to come out and say this is incredibly disingenuous. And I don't know, if any Americans are watching this, this woman should be on some sort of watch list, because to me, she's a threat to American national security. Anyone who is promoting Islamic regime propaganda to me, is a terrorist and is a threat to your national security. So keep an eye on this woman because she is a bad, bad actor. All right, let's just catch that again where she says, "You've never tried to change the regime." And then let's get to the king's response.
Thing is that Iran's condition actually now is much more fragile. Iran has predatory neighbors, including Turkey, which wants the dismemberment of Iran. And also the state of Israel would like Iran to be divided up. So why do you think that everybody is just going to sit on their hands and allow the Iranians to get rid of this regime? We have never tried to change regime behavior through real engagement.
Thank you.
So why don't you give that a chance?
Thank you.
I'm not sure ultimately what the specific question is, because that's almost like
I think, you know,
one course.
My first job in Washington was a research associate
about.
at CSIS, and Shireen Hunter, that she was a force of nature then, and she's still a force of nature now. I think I think
and I totally forgot about the first question.
The first question.
Maybe you
why
can
would
remind me? Yeah, and then we finish with that.
And the other question about in the immediate aftermath of security, if we can do it in about 35 seconds. Okay. Why are you optimistic?
Was the first question?
That was Shireen's first question. Okay. Was why are you given the history of the revolution?
Right.
And there was lots of hope for real progressive change. Why are you optimistic that this time, if the regime were to collapse, that you would have a different outcome? You would have a more democratic, open society in Iran, that it wouldn't revert to some sort of authoritarian system.
I think the biggest element that gives me confidence is not what the elite says, but what the grassroots says. Today, Iran's grassroots, the people on the streets, by the millions across the country, are chanting death to the dictator. In 1978, what drove the agenda was not the masses on the streets. It was certain intellectual circles, mostly the Marxists and the Islamists, who found some interest in common against the previous establishment, that drove the narrative. Some remnant of those still exist, but they're irrelevant because the grassroots have passed way beyond that point. The millions of Iranian youth today, the Gen Z of Iran today, is very clear on what it wants and what it doesn't want. And at the end of the day, they are the ones who will define the future. Not some think tank in Washington, not some reporter in such a newspaper here or in Europe, but the people on the streets. And those within the Iranian intelligentsia, academic centers, activists, civil society, advocates, lawyers, doctors, scientists, who catch up to that ask and that demand and are here to serve what these people at the end of the day want for themselves, are going to be the factor that would determine it. If everything we said right now was sort of crafted or engineered or designed in some office, in some building, writing a script for a country, I would have said, sure, maybe we don't know what the hell we're doing. All I'm doing is facilitating and maximizing the chance for that grassroots to succeed. So the real question is, can we actually help that grassroots fulfill their dream and aspirations to freedom? That's what it's all about. And that's what my campaign is there to reinforce and maximize their chance to succeed. And that needs to be understood. And I hope I can convey that to all of you, that this is what it's all about. Remember, what is the ask of the millions of Iranians who are fed up with this regime? And do they deserve better than what they have?
We are unfortunately out of time.
What a fantastic, fantastic answer. He not only called out that communist woman, but when he referred to the fact that Iran's future is not going to be dictated by some journalist, in the States or Europe, he was referring to Barbara Slavin, right? And all the other journalists and pundits who are on the payroll of the Islamic Republic. So I think this is a very good place to end the live stream. It went on a little bit longer than I thought because I was going to speak about something else. But of course, with the king's his talk today at the Council of Foreign Relations, it was a fantastic opportunity to speak about this. So I'm glad we got to watch the whole thing live. I live streamed it here. We watched it together. We spoke about it. We broke it down. So I appreciate all of that. And if you can, please join me on YouTube, like and subscribe to my channel, share the live stream. I'm going to be doing more of these sorts of videos where I take Reza Pahlavi's interviews and then I break it down section by section, because he says a lot of things, but a lot of it is sort of lost in the nuance here. And there's a lot of nuances that sometimes get lost. So I'm going to be doing more of this, especially since the movement to overthrow the Islamic Republic is really growing in strength, growing in numbers, and the regime is scared. And you saw with those two evil garbage women with their evil garbage questions, they're getting very scared. They know the end is near. They know they're going to be losing their paychecks very soon. So thank you everyone for joining. I appreciate it. Thank you for the comments. I enjoyed the conversations here as well on YouTube. So yeah, let's keep this going, and I will see you guys some point soon. Thank you everyone. Payande Iran, Javid Shah.